Chapter 567. War wasn't something that could be started immediately. Although there were signs of war outside the Northwest region, the people in the Northwest region were still living their lives peacefully and warmly. Because they believed that no matter what happened, as long as the Mohist army was there, the flames of war would not ignite in their homeland. As for the officials and generals in the Prince Ding mansion, they were well aware that the peace in front of them would not last for long. They all secretly rubbed their palms together in preparation. In the Prince Ding mansion, Mo Xiaoyao did not seem to be worried about the situation outside. After the military exercise ended, he rewarded the soldiers who deserved to be rewarded and threw the people who needed to be fixed elsewhere. Then, he returned to the Prince Ding mansion to be a peaceful prince. Every day, other than dealing with political matters, he would pester Yi Li to bully Mo Xiaobao. He was extremely carefree. Today, Mo Xiaobao, who had been given a rare day off by Mr. Qingyun, was once again bullied by his unscrupulous father. His eyes were wet as he looked at his mother with grievance. Yi Li could not help but sigh helplessly. This father and son seemed to be unable to interact peacefully for more than 2 hours. Mo Xiaobao was still young and did not have enough fighting strength. He could only be bullied without any strength to retaliate. If it was a normal person, they would probably stay as far away as possible from Mo Xiaoyao. However, Mo Xiaobao had to face difficulties. When there were no difficulties, he would create difficulties for himself. He was defeated time and time again. Seeing Mo Xiaobao pretending to be pitiful, the unscrupulous father sitting on the couch snorted in disdain. Pretending to be pitiful? Those were all leftovers from I. Of course, Prince Ding would never admit that at that time, because compared to Mo Xiaobao's round, white, tender, and innocent appearance, the effect of him pretending to be pitiful was greatly reduced. Furthermore, was it appropriate for a father to compete with his son in pretending to be pitiful? It was too undignified. Thus, Prince Ding firmly rejected this option. Speaking of which, Prince, as a father, it wasn't appropriate for him to bully a 5-year-old child just because he was older than his son, right? As for what happened afterwards, Mo Xiaoyao learned the art of acting pitiful on his own. In the end, he evolved into a little white cat who pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger. He looked pure on the outside, but he was incomparably scheming on the inside. This really made Mo Xiaoyao's stomach ache for a while. This was not something he could have predicted. Yi Li bent over and picked up her tearful son. She gently rubbed his little head and said, "Be good, Xiaobao. Mother will take you out to play. Let's not play with father anymore." Mo Xiaobao immediately reaches out his hands to hug Yi Li's neck, his smile incomparably brilliant. "Nyangqin is the best, Xiaobao loves Nyangqin the most." Yi Li was speechless. She knew that this brat was just pretending. However, not many people could stand that pitiful look even if it was just an act. Sometimes, Yi Li couldn't help but think, in the end, who did this child's temperament resemble? She and Mo Xiaoyao were not people who would reveal their emotions in front of others. Although Mo Xiaoyao loved to put on an act from time to time, Yi Li bet that when Mo Xiaoyao was a child, he definitely didn't reach the stage where he could cry whenever he wanted to. If this lively temperament was somewhat similar to Xu Qingyang, but when Xu Qingyang was 5 years old, his mind might not even be as sharp as Mo Xiaobao's little finger. "Xiaobao, come down. Father has something to say to you." On the soft couch, Missouri Xiaoyao slightly squints his eyes, smiling incomparably amiably as he beckons to Mo Xiaobao. Mo Xiaobao's intuition was not good. He tightly hugs Yi Li's neck and repeatedly shakes his head. He simply buries his little face into Yi Li's neck. Mo Xiaoyao didn't get angry. He chuckles and says, "You really don't want to listen? You won't regret it. Aya, if you regret it in the future, don't say that this father doesn't love you and didn't remind you." Mo Xiaobao secretly perks up his ears. Incomparably conflicted, he secretly turns his head to look at Mo Xiaoyao, who is still lying on the soft couch with his eyes closed. He only hears Mo Xiaoyao mutter to himself, "Speaking of which, in the past, your father, I, almost grew up to look like Zhong Qilan. If it wasn't for your grandfather, my father, who reminded me, our Prince Ding mansion's handsome appearance would have been cut off." Mo Xiaobao's face pales. Grow up to look like General Zhong? Zhong Qilan's appearance appeared in his mind. Mo Xiaobao repeatedly shakes his head to dispel this frightening image. It wasn't that Zhong Qilan's appearance was unpresentable. General Zhong's facial features were good and his figure was tall and imposing. No matter where he was placed, he would not be able to escape the praise of having a dignified appearance. But Mo Xiaobao's requirements for himself were exceptionally high. Even if he couldn't grow up to look like eldest uncle, there was still Feng San, Han Mingxi, or his father to choose from. General Zhong's appearance really didn't fit Mo Xiaobao classmates' aesthetic standards. Thus, for the sake of his future beauty, Mo Xiaobao kicks his little feet to make Yi Li put him down. He stands vigilantly in front of Mo Xiaoyao. After waiting for a while, Mo Xiaoyao lazily opens his eyes. He glances at Mo Xiaobao from the corner of his eyes for a long while before slowly reaching out to pinch Mo Xiaobao's round little face. Pinch, pinch, pinch. Mo Xiaobao angrily glares at his father and whimpers. Although it doesn't hurt too much, it means that he once again lost to this man in front of his mother. Mo Xiaoyao sits up and moves closer to Mo Xiaobao to carefully examine the little face that is red from his pinch. He gives a sinister smile. Do you know that you are very fat? You still dare to ask your mother to hug you. There will be a day when your mother will be tired out by a little fatty like you. Look at how chubby you are, you still dare to eat meat every day. Your father, I, was not even half as fat as you when I was 5 years old. Tell me, when you grow up, will you be even fatter than Zhong Qilan? I think you don't need to be called Mo Xiaobao anymore. How about changing your name to Mo Da Fatty? Hearing this, Mo Xiaobao lowers his head to look at his round, white, and tender little hands. His fragile little heart is finally shattered by his own imagination. He looks at Mo Xiaoyao with grief and indignation before running away in tears. Woo woo. Eldest uncle, father bullies me, Xiaoyao. Yi Li frowns, indifferently looking at the man who is lying on the soft couch laughing to the point of convulsing back and forth. How can you talk to a child like that? It's easy to hurt a child's self-esteem. Moreover, Mo Xiaobao is not as exaggerated as he says. It's just that his grandfather, Qing Yun, who loves him dearly, raised him too well. He looks slightly stronger than other children. It's a good thing for children to be a little chubbier. Mo Xiaoyao humphs. I'm doing it for his own good. It's about time for him to officially start practicing martial arts. If he grows too fat, the one suffering is himself. When he comes back in the future, Li will make more vegetarian dishes. Yi Li face palms. After all is said and done, it's still because she personally made all the meat dishes that her son likes last night. She slightly neglected a certain someone who told Mo Xiaobao to not be happy without meat, while Mo Xiaoyao prefers vegetarian dishes. When Xiaobao comes back to the academy, I'll personally make your favorite dishes, okay? Yi Li says. Compared to those wives who wash their hands and make soup for their husbands, Yi Li rarely cooks. Mo Xiaoyao nods in satisfaction and says, only for me. Yi Li nods and warns, you're not allowed to bully Xiaobao. Mo Xiaoyao waves his hand and says, don't worry, that brat's zodiac sign is a cockroach. After a while, he'll happily run back by himself. Yi Li is speechless. Her watery eyes flashed with a trace of sharpness. She reaches out and pinches his waist. Meeting Mo Xiaoyao's puzzled gaze, Yi Li smiles sinisterly. If Xiaobao's zodiac sign is a cockroach, then what's your zodiac sign? Chapter 568. Sure enough, in less than half an hour, student Mo Xiaobao happily appears in front of Yi Li, bashfully looking at Yi Li. He wants to say something but hesitates. Yi Li holds back her laughter, looking at her son and asks, what does Xiaobao want to say? Mo Xiaobao shyly says, Uncle said, even if Xiaobao really grows up to be like General Zhong, even if the whole world dislikes Xiaobao, mother will not dislike Xiaobao. Yi Li secretly glares at Mo Xiaoyao and says with a smile, of course, no matter what Xiaobao becomes, he will always be mother's darling. In this world, there is no mother who will dislike her own child. Mo Xiaobao's eyes light up, firmly nodding his head. Child knows, child won't eat meat in the future. Yi Li touches her son's little face and says, of course you still have to eat meat, but you still have to eat some meat and vegetables. You can't be picky like yesterday, do you understand? Child knows. Then, Student Xiaobao is shy. Can mother still hug Xiaobao? Mo Xiaoyao has a toothache. In the end, who did this scoundrel learn from? From ancient times until now, his Prince Ding mansion has never had such a strange breed. Was that bashful look really acceptable? Xu Qingchen. It's definitely him who taught Mo Xiaobao bad things. You just wait for me. Yi Li smiles. Of course you can. Mo Xiaobao solemnly nods his head. Xiaobao has grown up. I don't need mother to hug me. Xiaobao can hug mother. But right now, Xiaobao is still small. Let mother hug. He is really too considerate and filial. Yi Li's heart is as soft as the clouds in the sky. She bends over and hugs Mo Xiaobao to sit on her lap, lowering her head to kiss him. Mother will remember Xiaobao's words. Originally, she said she would take Mo Xiaobao out to play, but behind them, there is a Prince Ding who doesn't do his job and wants to follow them in the name of protecting his wife and child. In the carriage, Mo Xiaobao lies on his mother's lap, representing his uncle to despise his father. Mo Xiaoyao didn't mind at all. He raised his eyebrows and laughed. Kid, what do you know? This was called making the best use of people and things. It could also be said that he knew how to make good use of people. Since your uncle and uncle are so powerful, why should I work myself to death to deal with those chores? I, your father, am the most powerful person in the Northwest. I only need to set a direction and goal. Naturally, there will be countless people working hard to achieve this goal. Slacking off. Uncle said that an emperor who is lazy and ignores the affairs of the court is an incapable ruler. Therefore, a prince who is lazy and ignores the affairs of the court is also an incapable ruler. The little white bun sat on Yi Li's knees and seriously discussed the issue of diligent government. Please say that I have managed my subordinates well, thank you, Mo Xiaoyao said lazily, looking at his son who was trying to argue with reason. Silly boy, you don't even know that you've been tricked by your uncle. He's clearly afraid that you'll be like your father and not do anything when you grow up and implicate him. However, your father won't let you become like me, because I'm still waiting for you to take over my position when you grow up. At that time, I will take Miss Li and fly far away. Hug my wife, dream on. The little bun who didn't know that after being tricked by his father, he was tricked by his uncle opened his eyes wide. Of course not. Uncle said that diligent government makes a good emperor. Everything his uncle said was right. Thank you for the reminder, but your father, I am not an emperor. Mo Xiaoyao said with waning interest. Although he had learned many things, the 5-year-old little bun still didn't completely understand the difference between a prince and an emperor. Moreover, in the Northwest, the difference between an emperor and a prince wasn't that big. Classmate Mo Xiaobao's understanding was that there were many princes in other places, so princes had to listen to the emperor. However, there was only one prince in the Northwest, his father, and he didn't have to listen to the emperor. Therefore, his father, this prince, was one of a kind and was also the greatest prince in the world. What was so great about being an emperor? Xiling had one, Dhu state had one, and Northern Rong and Southern Zhao had one each. The more emperors there were, the less valuable they were. However, there was only one Prince Ding. If he wanted to be one, he had to be the most unique and most valuable one. Mo Xiaobao's strange concept directly caused the establishment of an empire to be delayed by many, many years. Unable to outtalk his father, Mo Xiaobao proudly turned his head and fell into his mother's embrace. Mo Xiaoyao ignored him and looked at him with a smile. Son, your great-grandfather must have told you many history books. In history, there were emperors who went to court every 10 days to half a month and still had the country prospering. There were also emperors who woke up in the middle of the night and still had their country destroyed. Therefore, whether an emperor is good or bad has nothing to do with whether you are diligent or not. Mo Xiaobao thought about it and crawled out of his mother's embrace. He nodded and said, I know, it also has to do with being smart. The idiot that father mentioned who woke up in the middle of the night was the idiot emperor of Dhu state. After saying this, Mo Xiaobao nodded heavily to confirm his own thoughts. Seeing him so serious, Mo Xiaoyao couldn't help but laugh. He said with a smile, how do you know it's that idiot? His country hasn't been destroyed yet. Mo Jingqi did wake up in the middle of the night and sleep in the middle of the night, but it wasn't necessarily because he was diligent. Mo Xiaoyao felt that it was more because he was guarding against this and that and couldn't sleep. Mo Xiaobao said seriously, "Of course he's an idiot. He chased father away, he also chased granduncle and uncle away. He also likes the worst Prime Minister Liu's family and doesn't like Wuyo Jie's mother. Even his own mother and younger brother don't like him. Wuyo Jie also doesn't like him. Eldest uncle says this is called destroying the Great Wall. Feng San says this is called asking for death." Yi Li, who originally found it interesting, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What kind of nonsense did he learn? Along the way, they chatted and laughed. Time passed quickly and unknowingly, it was already noon. The horse-drawn carriage stopped in front of a mountain. After getting off the carriage, they had to walk the rest of the way. Mo Xiaoyao naturally couldn't let Yi Li carry Mo Xiaobao, who was about to become fat, for such a long distance, so he could only carry him himself. Mo Xiaobao didn't feel uncomfortable in his father's arms at all. He calmly laid down and curiously looked at everything in front of him while asking, "Mother, where are we going?" Yi Li faintly smiled and said, "You'll know when we get there." Actually, the father and son's relationship wasn't that bad. Although they usually quarreled, it could be seen that Mo Xiaobao didn't have any grudges against his unkind father. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so happy lying in his father's arms. The group walked into the mountain. In less than 5 li, the road gradually became more heavily guarded. The deeper they went, the stricter the security became. Along the way, the guards all bowed to the two. Until they were stopped at a checkpoint. Token, password. Mo Xiaoyao knew this place before, but because he gave full authority to Yi Li, he didn't really come here. Hearing this, he couldn't help being surprised. With a smile, he said, "I also need a token and password." The guards at the checkpoint didn't move at all. Token, password. Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow as he looked at Yi Li. With his sharp senses, he could naturally feel that there were at least several hundred arrows pointing in their direction. If there wasn't a token and password, Mo Xiaoyao didn't doubt that these soldiers would really shoot arrows. Yi Li took out a very unique-looking token and handed it over to the soldier. "Soldier's spirit, return the token." The soldier looked at the token and confirmed its authenticity before returning it to her. "Wu Wei, I'm not afraid. Princess, please come in." After entering, they passed through 3 or 4 similar checkpoints on the way. The password for each checkpoint was completely different. Adding on the advantage of the terrain and this kind of defense, even Mo Xiaoyao didn't have the confidence to say that they could enter unharmed. "Li, I'm really more and more curious about what is inside." This mysterious place wasn't far from Glass City, but no one would have thought that this originally unremarkable place was the true tomb of the previous dynasty's great ancestor, or rather, the location of the treasure. This tomb wasn't as grand as a normal emperor's tomb. It couldn't even be compared to the empty tomb near Hong Province. It could barely be considered a huge underground palace built in the mountains. There were no beautiful marble decorations, no gold, silver, jewels, or rare treasures. It was just like an ordinary underground palace. If people came in looking for treasures, they would definitely be disappointed. And now, there were already a lot of people busily walking in and out of this place. Mo Xiaoyao curiously looked at these people busily making some strange metal tools. Especially in the innermost area, many people were gathered together to study a hollow copper pillar that was as thick as a person. Even though he didn't know what it was, but looking at the hollow copper pillar, for some reason, Mo Xiaoyao intuitively felt a trace of danger. Calmly moving away from the hole in the copper pillar, Mo Xiaoyao turned to look at Yi Li and raised his brows. "Li, this is the thing left behind by the previous dynasty's great ancestor. To be honest, I really don't understand what this thing is." Yi Li looked at him and softly sighed. "Actually, I also don't understand whether this is good or not. When she first came here and saw the thing left behind by the previous dynasty's great ancestor, she was shocked. At the same time, she was a bit hesitant. Without natural development, was it really good to let the cold weapon era enter the hot weapon era? Presumably, that senior was also hesitant, so this place had never been truly used. Therefore, in the history of the previous dynasty, she had never seen anything that shouldn't have appeared in this era. Then, Does Li understand now? Mo Xiaoyao asked with a smile. Yi Li smiled faintly. Let nature take its course. Chapter 569. Yes, let nature take its course. If Yi Li had not been reborn into this era that she was completely unfamiliar with, but into a dynasty in history, she would not have hesitated. She would definitely take out these things without any hesitation. So what if she pushed forward the course of history? It would not be worse than the original history. Right now, Yi Li did not hesitate for long. She was not a person that liked to be conflicted. It was just that no matter if it was Emperor Gaozu of the previous dynasty or herself, they did not have much understanding of the military industry. She didn't know the original identity of the previous dynasty's great ancestor, but even if Yi Li knew the structure of all the most advanced weapons in the world like the back of her hand, it didn't mean that she could create the exact same weapon. Needless to say, he couldn't solve the problem of materials alone. Therefore, Yi Li did not treat this place as a place where weapons of mass destruction could be mass-produced on the battlefield. Instead, she used the most basic knowledge that the skilled craftsmen of this era could understand to give them a completely different concept from the current era. Yi Li did not need them to immediately create an AK-47 or long-range missile. They only needed to work hard in this direction. No matter if it was 100 years or 100 years, Yi Li believed that with these seeds, this land would not encounter what her hometown had experienced in the future. Wang Fei. A middle-aged man walked over. When he saw Yi Li, his eyes lit up and he rushed over with a fanatical expression. Mo Xiaoyao held Mo Xiaobao as he coldly stared at the charging man. He narrowed his eyes in displeasure and stepped in front of Yi Li. The charging man stopped in his tracks. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao's gloomy expression, he knew that his actions just now had been rude. He could only awkwardly stand there, not knowing what to do. Yi Li walked out from behind Mo Xiaoyao and said with a faint smile, "Master Li, what is it?" The middle-aged man quickly said, "We have made the things Wang Fei gave us, but there are some questions we want to ask Wang Fei." Yi Li nodded and said, "Then let's go take a look together." Placed in front of Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao was a pistol. Mo Xiaoyao was naturally unfamiliar with the things in front of him, but Yi Li's eyes flashed with a trace of nostalgia and joy. She walked up and picked up the gun on the table. To be honest, Yi Li had seen all sorts of advanced weaponry in her previous life. The gun in front of her was so crude that it was unbearable to look at. Compared to the earliest automatic handguns in the world in his previous life, it was much cruder. However, it only took them 5 years to go through the hundreds of years of evolution in the history of firearms. Yi Li believed that these skilled craftsmen had done their best to create such a weapon. Picking up the pistol, Yi Li turned around and smiled at Xiaobao. "Xiaobao, cover your ears." Mo Xiaobao looked curiously at the thing in his mother's hand, but he still obediently covered his ears with his little hands. The pistol spun in Yi Li's hand. Yi Li's eyes changed as she raised the gun and fired 3 shots at the target not far away. After the 3 loud bangs, Yi Li looked at the target in front of her and slightly frowned. The first shot had hit the bullseye, the second shot had only hit the 4th ring, and the third shot had missed. Of course, this was not a problem with Yi Li's marksmanship. It was clear that this was a problem with the gun itself. Master Li, who was following behind, still had a burning gaze, but this time, he was not looking at Yi Li, but at the gun in her hand. This thing that Yi Li disliked was as precious as a peerless beauty in his eyes. Master Li scratched his beard in annoyance and said, "We've made 2 of these things, and one of them just exploded. This one is fine, but we can't hit it. The more we hit, the more we missed. There really hasn't been anyone like Wang Fei who has hit the bullseye on the first try." However, the second and third shots were clearly not good. The difference was so great that he couldn't help but wonder if Wang Fei's first shot was an accident. It seems like it's a problem with the materials. As for suggestions for improvement, I will organize them for you later. I'll have to trouble you to worry about the materials. I will order people to send all the needed minerals. I can't do anything else. She was not a military expert, nor was she an expert in military materials. She could only give them the general information she knew and some concepts and theories. They had to explore the rest step by step. Master Li felt some regret, but he knew he could not force this and could only nod in agreement. Master Li, who had a lot on his mind, left, but he left the gun behind. Even though this was the first finished product they had made, because the results were not satisfactory, Master Li did not feel any heartache and kept it. He even encouraged himself to make better things when they returned. Yi Li took out the remaining bullets in the gun before throwing it to Mo Xiaobao, who had been eagerly waiting to play. Receiving the new toy, Mo Xiaobao immediately focused all his attention on the thing in his hands. He did not care about his father holding him in his arms and not letting him come down to play. This is something left behind by the previous Emperor Gaozu? Mo Xiaoyao looked around and asked. Yi Li nodded. She looked at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, Xiaoyao, what do you think of this gun? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and looked at the thing in Mo Xiaobao's hands, saying, it has no practical value. Its range was not as far as the arrows of a master archer. Even though the first shot had made him interested, the last 2 shots had made him disappointed. For now, it has no practical value. Yi Li nodded in agreement and pulled Mo Xiaoyao forward. The things that the previous emperor had prepared naturally were not just these. Even Yi Li herself didn't know much about it, and it wasn't like she didn't have anything that had practical value. As they walked into an empty room, the smell of sulfur greeted them. In the corner of the room, there were several wooden boxes neatly placed. Yi Li walked over and opened the topmost box. There were some black spherical things in the box. Mo Xiaoyao pondered for a moment before saying, this is gunpowder. It was not that this era did not have gunpowder. There were already people who used it in war. However, gunpowder needed to be ignited with fire and its killing power was not high, so even the Mohist army did not use it often. However, this did not mean that Mo Xiaoyao was completely ignorant. Yi Li nodded and said, that's right, it is gunpowder. However, I prefer to call it a bomb. Mo Xiaoyao raised his brows and asked, how is the power? Since Li specially showed it to him, it naturally would not be normal. Yi Li casually picked up one and said with a smile, let's try it somewhere else and we'll know. It was hard to say about other weapons, but Yi Li was still very confident in the power of the bomb. This was because the method to make these bombs was not left behind by the previous Emperor Gaozu. It was provided by Yi Li herself. As expected, the bomb was thrown into a spacious room in the underground palace. After a loud explosion, Mo Xiaoyao could not help but reveal a look of surprise. After leaving the place where the bomb was placed, Yi Li brought Mo Xiaoyao into the innermost secret room in the underground palace. The layout of the room was very simple. It was filled with all kinds of scrolls and magical weapons. Mo Xiaoyao saw that a few of them were the same as the ones he had seen when he passed by outside. Chapter 570. Yi Li took out a thick booklet from a hidden compartment and handed it to Mo Xiaoyao. She smiled and said, this is the treasure left behind by the previous emperor. Mo Xiaoyao took the booklet and flipped through it. The pages were filled with drawings of various firearms, as well as annotations. However, there were many foreign characters in the annotations that Mo Xiaoyao could not understand. However, this did not stop him from understanding. This was a booklet filled with drawings of various weapons, and the ones that could be made here were all of the worst quality. This was because many of them looked much better than the toys that Mo Xiaobao loved so much that he could not bear to part with them. Looking at the booklet, Yi Li softly sighed and said, if we can really make all of these things and mass-produce them, then the army that obtains them will be truly invincible. Mo Xiaoyao frowned slightly. He looked at Yi Li and asked, does Li like these things a lot? Yi Li was slightly startled. After a long time, she nodded and said, yes, I like them a lot. How could she not like them? In the short 20 years of her previous life, she had been working with these things for 20 years. She was familiar with them and liked them as if they were her family and comrades. Mo Xiaoyao said, then let's have people make them all. Yi Li smiled and said, making them all? I'm afraid we won't be able to see it in our lifetime. If we really want to make all of these things, how can it be done without 100 or 200 years? The military was not the only aspect that was involved in this. Every aspect of technology had to be developed at the same time to be able to create such advanced weapons. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said, if that's the case, then this Emperor Gaozu of the previous dynasty really was a genius. It's a pity that he did not make these things back then. Or perhaps he wanted to make them but did not have the time. After the previous dynasty's Emperor Gaozu ascended the throne and unified the world, he did not rule for too long. Based on the scale of this underground palace, it was very likely that he died before he could complete it. Yi Li smiled faintly, a genius? Perhaps. Naturally, the blueprints left behind were not considered geniuses. In fact, in Yi Li's opinion, these blueprints could not even be considered professional. At most, they were at the level of an amateur weapon enthusiast. However, it was not easy for a transmigrator to unify the world in a chaotic world. Even the founder of the Da Chu state could not be considered to have truly unified the world. After all, Shi Ling and Da Chu state were originally one entity. Yi Li herself could be considered a transmigrator or a reborn person, so she naturally understood that people like them could not be said to be blessed by the heavens. Although it was an additional chance to survive, it wasn't that easy to be as domineering as in many novels, with groups of underlings and beautiful women. Her environment was already not bad, and she had experienced so many things. One could imagine how much hardship and hard work that Senior had gone through to create a dynasty. Is Li very familiar with him? Mo Xiaoyao placed Mo Xiaobao on the table and turned to look at Yi Li as he asked. Mo Xiaobao seemed to have sensed that his parents were talking about something very important. He did not speak much and obediently sat on the table playing with the small toy in his hand. Just now, Yi Li had retracted the bullet too quickly, so this child did not notice that something was missing from the gun. So he was very confused as to why he could not shoot something powerful from the gun like his mother. Yi Li smiled faintly and fondly stroked the calligraphy on the booklet on the table. The person in the booklet had very showily used flowery characters to leave an English signature. The people of this era could only see it as a pattern. After pondering for a moment, Yi Li said, I am somewhat familiar with this previous dynasty's great ancestor. Perhaps no one in this world is more familiar with him than me. Mo Xiaoyao was silent. Yi Li smiled at him and asked, you don't suspect my relationship with him? Mo Xiaoyao said, Li is the granddaughter of the Shu family. The descendants of the Shu family could not have any relationship with the previous dynasty's emperor. Yi Li blinked and asked, then you don't have anything you want to ask? Mo Xiaoyao was silent for a moment before asking, Li came from the same place as him? Yi Li was stunned. She did not think that Mo Xiaoyao would make such a guess. So close. No, this was the real answer. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her with a gentle gaze and smiled faintly. Li has never hidden anything from me, has she? She clearly came from a scholarly family and has never interacted with outsiders, yet she has such inconceivable skills. There is also Li's familiarity with the battlefield. Occasionally, she has some strange but novel ideas. There is also the writing on that treasure map. Even the previous dynasty's imperial family did not recognize it, yet Li seems to be very familiar with it. And I feel that previous dynasty's great ancestor is actually very similar to Li in some ways. Yi Li smiled helplessly and said, so I actually revealed so many flaws. Mo Xiaoyao gently stroked Yi Li's cheek and said with a smile, Li has never hidden anything. Yi Li admitted that other than the very beginning in front of Mo Xiaoyao, she had never seriously tried to hide anything. It was not only because Mo Xiaoyao was too sensitive, but deliberately trying to hide things would only backfire. More importantly, Mo Xiaoyao was the most important person in her life. If she still had to hide things in front of him, then she might as well have been a well-behaved girl from the very beginning. It was too tiring. Sizing up Mo Xiaoyao with some curiosity, Yi Li asked, what does Mo Xiaoyao think of me? Mo Xiaoyao said, Buddhism and Taoism all talk about past and present lives. Did Li carry the memories of her past life from the moment she was born? Li's personality had not changed much since she was young, and there were no problems with her memory. Even if it was when she was very young, she could still remember clearly, and the feelings between her and the Shu family. Deep. Naturally, it would not be the reincarnation of a soul in a corpse that was written in those supernatural stories. Then it could only be explained by past and present lives. Yi Li nodded, smiling as she looked at Mo Xiaoyao and said, "Counting it like this, I'm actually over 50 years old this year. I'm much older than you." Mo Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes unhappily, staring at Yi Li's slightly proud smile with warning. If Mo Xiaoyao was not still sitting at the table and staring at the two, perhaps Mo Xiaoyao would not be so polite. He glanced at the chubby child on the table with disdain. Children are really the biggest hindrance. Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao did not say anything, Yi Li's eyes turned and said, "Actually, I was a man in my past life. Do you really not mind?" "Man?" Mo Xiaoyao said in a low voice. Yi Li nodded, saying seriously, "That's right, I was a soldier in my past life. It could be considered as sacrificing my life for the country. Otherwise, why do you think I'm a woman dressed as a man?" In the understanding of the people of this era, soldiers were naturally men. She stared at Mo Xiaoyao curiously and asked, "Xiaoyao, you really don't mind?" Suddenly having the interest to tease people, Yi Li smiled as she looked at the man in front of her who was as calm as water. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and stared at Yi Li for a while, then suddenly grabbed Yi Li and fiercely kissed her tender red lips. Woo! Yi Li was stunned, her eyes suddenly widening, but she accidentally glanced at a certain chubby child behind Mo Xiaoyao looking at them, his dark eyes filled with curiosity. A wave of heat immediately spread to her face. Yi Li hurriedly used all her strength to push Mo Xiaoyao away. Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao was staring at her lips as if he wanted more, Yi Li could only fiercely glare at him. She was extremely regretful of her actions of teasing Mo Xiaoyao in front of her 5-year-old son. Yi Li felt that she had never lost so much face in her 2 lifetimes. She only hoped that her family's Xiao Bao was still young and would quickly forget about this matter. Otherwise, she really didn't have the face to face her son. "Now you know whether I mind or not?" Mo Xiaoyao asked in a low voice as he smiled at her angry red face. Yi Li gritted her teeth. Prince's psychological adaptability is really strong. Mo Xiaoyao smiled but didn't answer, looking at Yi Li who was still angry. She really was a stupid girl. How could the usually elegant and graceful Li, whose every action was filled with flirtatious charm in his eyes, be a man in her past life? "Father King, Mother." Mo Xiaobao blinked his pure big eyes as he looked at his parents, curiously asking, "Father King and Mother are playing kissing?" Xiaobao also wants to play. "Mother, kiss kiss." In order to express his expectation, Mo Xiaobao deliberately used his little chubby hand to point at his pink and tender little mouth. Yi Li turned pale with fright. "Chen who told you that Mother Anne are playing kissing?" Her son was only 5 years old. Did he need to be so precocious? She remembered that they had never done anything too intimate in front of Xiaobao. Was it because she always kissed Xiaobao? Mo Xiaobao seriously thought about it and said, "It's Father King. Last time I saw Father King secretly kissing Mother while she was asleep. Father King said that only people who love each other can play kissing. Xiaobao also loves Mother. Xiaobao wants a kiss." Mo Xiaoyao. Yi Li angrily glared at Mo Xiaoyao. "This month you will sleep in the study." Finished speaking, she didn't wait for Mo Xiaoyao's explanation and turned to leave. Mo Xiaoyao's face darkened as he stared at Mo Xiaobao on the table. Mo Xiaobao innocently looked at his Father King with his pure big eyes. "Father King, why is Mother angry? Why didn't she kiss Xiaobao? Does Mother not love Xiaobao anymore? Don't think that you can escape by pretending to be innocent. When did I secretly kiss your mother? Even if he secretly kissed her, how could it be seen by a 5-year-old kid?" He, Mo Xiaoyao, who had been unhindered for a lifetime, was actually tricked by his own son. Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao was about to stretch out his evil claws, Mo Xiaobao quickly crawled up and used his butt to cry in front of his father. "Woo woo. Mother doesn't love Xiaobao anymore. Xiaobao is the child that Mother doesn't love." Looking at his son who was lying on the table with his little butt sticking up and crying, Mo Xiaoyao finally didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When this kid grows up, he will definitely be a disaster. Chapter 571. In the early winter of the 18th year of Emperor Jing's reign in Dachu State, the barbarian tribes in the north of Dachu State invaded. Emperor Mo Jingqi mobilized 300,000 soldiers to expel the enemy but was defeated. Of the 300,000 elite soldiers, only 70 to 80,000 remained and fled. Within a month, the defending generals of Da Chu state retreated several cities. The Northern Army chased them all the way to Zijing Pass in the north of Da Chu state. They were less than 400 li away from the Chu capital. In the 12th month, Mo Jingqi appointed Northern General Leng Huai as the general to suppress the enemy. Leng Huai's eldest son, Leng Qingyu, as the deputy general to lead 400,000 soldiers to face the enemy. However, the barbarians in the north were brave and skilled in battle. They had been fighting for many years and were very valiant. Even a veteran like Leng Huai, who had been on the battlefield for a long time, could barely hold on. It was extremely difficult to reclaim the land they had lost. The two armies in front of Zijing Pass faced each other for a long time. The people in Da Chu state were also anxious and restless. Many courtiers had even suggested moving the capital to Guangling in the south. Mo Jingqi naturally would not agree to moving the capital. Now, the south was actually Mo Jingli's territory. In Jing, this younger brother of his was faintly looking down on him. If he went to the south, Mo Jingli would probably dare to directly usurp the throne. But even so, Mo Jingqi's days were not easy. Just the daily battle reports sent to the imperial court were enough to give him a headache. There were also the people who had fled to Jing because of the chaos of war. Large numbers of people flooded into Jing, but there was limited space in the capital. Naturally, it could not take in so many refugees. But if these refugees were allowed to starve, die of illness, or freeze to death, it would probably cause chaos before the powerful soldiers of the north attacked. Looking at the mountain of memorials in front of him, Mo Jingqi had a splitting headache. Only now did he have to admit in his heart that compared to Mo Xiuyao, he was not as capable. Mo Xiuyao was able to turn the tide in such a dire situation, but he could only rage at a mess of reports. In the depths of the imperial palace, noble consort Liu sat by the window, silently looking at the pure white snow outside. The snow-white snowfox cloak made her cold face look like an ice sculpture, chilling to the bone. Behind her, Tan Jiji was sitting on a soft couch at the side. He was holding onto a heater as he revealed a comfortable expression and sighed, "Isn't imperial concubine Nyang Nyang afraid of the cold? It's all white outside, what's there to see?" Noble consort Liu looked back and glanced at him coldly. "Why are you here?" Tan Jiji smiled and said, "Of course I'm here to help noble consort." Noble consort Liu sneered and said disdainfully, "Help me?" He was nothing more than a drowning dog that was wanted in Nanzhao. What's the use of you and Shu Manlin's meticulous plans? If Prince Ding and Shu Qingchen moved their fingers, wouldn't you have no choice but to run away with your tail between your legs? Now that you don't have Shu Manlin, what other cards do you have? Tan Jiji's expression changed slightly. A trace of anger and viciousness flashed through his eyes. He quickly smiled and said, "Does noble consort Nyang Nyang think that Shu Manlin is the only card I have?" Noble consort Liu looked at him calmly and said, "What else do you have? Do you want to say that you're a descendant of the imperial family of the previous dynasty? You're all descendants of the imperial family. That young master Lin Yuan did much better than you. You've been working hard for so many years without accomplishing anything, and you still dare to say that you want to help I? Shut up." Tan Jiji was furious. His expression was ferocious. Who does Ren Qining think he is? He's just an imposter. He was the imperial family's descendant of the previous dynasty. He was Lin Yuan. Ren Qining was just an imposter who came out of nowhere. Noble consort Liu snorted and didn't say anything else, but the contempt in her eyes was obvious. Did he think that the title of the imperial family's descendant was valuable? A descendant of the imperial family that had perished nearly 200 years ago because the people had no way to make a living could never win the support of the people. That Ren Qining, who called himself Lin Yuan, probably saw this clearly and chose to start from the northern region. As long as he really took over the world and announced his identity as the imperial family's descendant, the resistance to his ascension to the throne would be much lower. Compared to a foreign race entering the Central Plains and becoming the emperor, The people and gentry would naturally be more willing to accept a descendant of the previous dynasty with noble blood. Seeing noble consort Liu's contempt, Tan Jiji breathed heavily to hide the viciousness in his eyes. Finally, he laughed and said, "You really don't need it. Maybe I can tell noble consort Liu a very important piece of news. Of course, if noble consort Liu isn't interested, then forget it." Noble consort Liu frowned slightly and stared at Tan Jiji with some displeasure. It seemed that she was considering whether she should listen to his so-called news. Tan Jiji leaned on the soft couch and said with a smile, "Noble consort Liu, don't worry. This may not be bad news for you." Noble consort Liu narrowed her eyes. "It may not be bad news, but it could be bad news. Go ahead." Tan Jiji raised his eyebrows and said, "Prince Li bought a magical medicine from the holy land of Nanjiang." Noble consort Liu looked at him coldly and didn't even blink. Her indifferent look seemed to be saying that it had nothing to do with her. Tan Jiji laughed loudly and looked at noble consort Liu, saying, "I like noble consort Liu's personality. It's so cold and heartless that it makes people admire you." That was why Prince Ding didn't like this kind of woman. She was as beautiful as an ice sculpture, and her heart was so cold and heartless that it could make any man admire her wholeheartedly. Look at the Princess Ding married to Prince Ding. She was elegant and graceful when she was calm, but radiant when she acted. She could be kind and cruel, but she could also be gentle and strong. She had outstanding abilities and a devoted husband. She had an extraordinary status, but she wasn't arrogant at all. This kind of woman was the dream of every man. Noble consort Liu's appearance and talent were nothing in the eyes of a man who really had excellent taste. Of course, he would never tell this proud woman in front of him about this. Noble consort Liu looked at Tan Jiji with a frown. For some reason, she felt that Tan Jiji's words weren't all compliments. But it didn't matter. She had never taken Tan Jiji seriously, so she didn't care what he thought of her. "Noble consort Liu, are you really not interested in what Prince Li bought? Or, noble consort Liu, you don't want to know who Prince Li bought it for?" Tan Jiji said with a smile. Noble consort Liu thought of something and looked at Tan Jiji calmly. Tan Jiji knew her very well, so he knew that he had aroused her interest. Tan Jiji didn't try to hide it. He said with a smile, "Yes, it's what you think. It's for the one in the imperial study. And, I guess that the medicine has been used for a month." Noble consort Liu frowned and said, "His Majesty doesn't feel unwell." Tan Jiji said with a smile, "Of course he doesn't feel unwell. Not only that, his body will be very good. But, once the medicine stops or it's been used for too long, His Majesty will suffer a lot. There used to be a lot of medicine, but after Princess Anxi ascended the throne, the sacred land of Nanjiang rebelled and burned the entire sacred land of Nanjiang to the ground. Of course, the medicine is gone. Mo Xiaoyao has no more than half a year's supply." Noble consort Liu thought for a while with a frown, then asked, "What do you want?" Chapter 572. Tan Jiji smiled faintly. "What I want? I'm afraid you can't give it to me right now. Why don't we talk about it when you can?" The noble consort lowered her eyes, hiding the sharpness and murderous intent in her eyes. She said faintly, "All right, as long as I can do it, I can promise you anything. However, what can you do for I right now?" Tan Jiji smiled. "This one has been by Mo Jingqi's side for more than a decade. No one in this world knows better than me what he will do. Isn't this enough? Doesn't noble consort Liu want to know who Mo Jingqi's true confidants are? Also, I can help you deal with Prince Li." Noble consort Liu's eyes moved. After a while, she nodded and said, "It's a deal. I hope you won't disappoint." Tan Jiji smiled, "Noble consort, just wait and see." The 19 years of Emperor Jing's reign could be considered the worst year since the founding of Da Chu state. Before the new year was over, news of Leng Huai's defeat and his request for help came from the border. It had to be known that Zijing Pass was less than 400 li away from the capital. If they rode fast, they could get there in one day. If they continued to lose at this distance, they would be right in front of their eyes. In addition, just after receiving Leng Huai's request for help, Mo Jingqi fell ill. Although he was barely able to attend court, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the emperor was seriously ill just by looking at his sallow complexion and dispirited spirit. With the two matters overlapping, it made people feel as if there was no light at all. It was as if Da Chu State's fate was coming to an end. Mo Jingqi barely managed to gather the troops and rations to support Leng Huai before he fell ill on the bed and was bedridden. In the bedroom, the Empress Dowager, who had been abstaining from worldly affairs for a long time, and the Empress, who had been recuperating behind closed doors, appeared. At the same time, Prince Li, noble consort Liu, Prime Minister Liu, and several princes of the imperial family were waiting in the room. After the imperial physician finished taking the pulse, the Empress Dowager anxiously asked, "Imperial physician, what's wrong with the emperor's body?" The imperial physician who was taking the pulse frowned and respectfully said, "The emperor seems to have taken some medicine that is harmful to his body. Coupled with the daily fatigue, his body suddenly collapsed." The Empress Dowager suddenly stood up and said, "What do you mean by harmful drugs? Someone poisoned the emperor?" The imperial physician shook his head and said, "Forgive me, Empress Dowager." Empress Dowager misunderstood. What this humble subject means is, His Majesty seems to have taken something forbidden. That's why he hurt his body. The expressions of everyone in the sleeping chamber changed instantly, and they all became a little strange. The forbidden medicines mentioned by the imperial physicians were mostly things like the 5 minerals powder or some drugs that were used to kill wolves and tigers. In history, there were some dynasties where taking 5 minerals powder became the norm, but from the previous dynasty to the Da Chu state, it was listed as a forbidden drug. If word of this got out, the emperor and the imperial family would lose all face. "Emperor, you are really stupid." The Empress Dowager glared at her son on the bed and said hatefully. Although she didn't love this son as much as she did her younger son, the Empress Dowager didn't want him to die. Seeing him lying sickly on the bed, the Empress Dowager only felt resentful that he didn't live up to her expectations. Mo Jingqi opened his mouth and endured the pain in his heart that was like being bitten by ants. He frowned and said, "Zhen didn't." He knew that no one would believe him because his current symptoms did seem like someone who was addicted to 5 minerals powder. However, he knew the effects of the coldstones powder, so he was sure that he had never taken that forbidden medicine before. His gaze fell on Mo Jingli standing on the side. Mo Jingqi froze and suddenly thought of something. He fiercely glared at Mo Jingli. How could Mo Jingli not see Mo Jingqi's gaze? He walked forward and his usually stern face revealed a faint smile. "Imperial brother, do you have any orders?" "You. It's you." That faint smile was provocative and complacent in Mo Jingqi's eyes. He pointed at Mo Jingli and gasped. Mo Jingli didn't show any fear of his plot being exposed. He still said respectfully, "Imperial brother, what are you talking about? I don't understand." Prime Minister Liu had long been ready to make trouble. How could he let go of this opportunity? He stepped forward and said, "Prince Li, His Majesty is obviously referring to the forbidden drug you gave to His Majesty." Mo Jingqi glanced at Prime Minister Liu and nodded. Obviously, he agreed with Prime Minister Liu. Prime Minister Liu became more confident. He pointed at Mo Jingli and said harshly, "Prince Li, how dare you? How dare you?" The Empress Dowager said harshly. She stared at Prime Minister Liu coldly and said, "Prince Li and His Majesty are blood brothers. How could he hurt His Majesty? Now we are facing a great enemy. As the Prime Minister, you don't help His Majesty wholeheartedly. Instead, you sow discord between His Majesty's brothers. How should you be punished?" Prime Minister Liu frowned and said, "Empress Dowager, this is His Majesty's idea. Even if there is no evidence, it is a serious crime to murder His Majesty. Shouldn't Prince Li be arrested first and then investigated?" The Empress Dowager stared at Mo Jingqi with tears in her eyes and said, "Emperor, do you really think so? Do you think Li wants to hurt you? Without any evidence, you suspect your own younger brother. Are you going to lock me up as well?" Mo Jingli stepped forward and said, "Imperial brother, please be clear. This younger brother will definitely not have the intention to kill you. If you don't believe me, just give the order to kill me." Mo Jingqi stared at Mo Jingli with hatred. It seemed that he wanted to cut Mo Jingli into pieces. However, he couldn't say a word at this moment. He felt that his limbs and bones were being bitten by countless ants. If he didn't care so much about his face, he would have been rolling on the bed and screaming in pain. His lips trembling, Mo Jingqi spat out a few words. "Get out! Get out!" Everyone was stunned. Prime Minister Liu looked at Mo Jingqi anxiously. At this moment, they should take advantage of the victory and arrest Prince Li. However, since His Majesty had spoken, the others naturally couldn't stay. The Empress Dowager stood up and said, "Emperor, take care of yourself. I will go back first." The Empress Dowager left first, and the others had to follow her. Mo Jingli was the last to leave. He looked back at Mo Jingli, who was lying on the bed, with a weird smile on his face. Back in Zhengde Palace, Missouri Jingli said respectfully to the Empress Dowager, "Mother, thank you very much, Pa." Before he could finish speaking, a slap landed swiftly and harshly on Mo Jingli's face. Mo Jingli stopped talking and raised his head to look at the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager's eyes were cold and full of sadness and disappointment. "Li Er, how dare you use such a vicious drug on Qi Er? He is your brother. Do you still have any humanity?" Mo Jingli wanted to explain. "Mother, I..." The Empress Dowager waved her hand and said coldly, "You don't need to explain. I am not muddle-headed." Mo Jingli put down his hand that was covering half of his face. The Empress Dowager's slap was not for show. A few red and swollen finger marks appeared on Mo Jingli's face immediately. Mo Jingli stopped quibbling and said coldly, "Mother, you are right. So what if I did it? Is Imperial Mother the same as that old man surnamed Liu? Do you also want to lock me up?" Although she knew it was Mo Jingli who did it, the Empress Dowager was still emotional when she heard it from him. She couldn't help crying. Her face, which had been well maintained, suddenly aged more than 10 years. She sat on the luxurious phoenix chair, tears streaming down her face. "What a sin! Why did I give birth to you two bastards? I am sorry to the late emperor. I am sorry to the ancestors of the Mo family." Mo Jingli looked coldly at the Empress Dowager's crying appearance. He didn't feel any guilt in his heart. The one who stirred up the ambition in his heart was no one else but the crying mother in front of him. Because she was dissatisfied with her imperial brother controlling her day by day, she wanted to depose him and push him to the throne. The struggle for the throne had always been a bloody one, and now she was blaming him for being cruel and merciless. It was a pity that there was no turning back. He and Mo Jingqi were destined to fight to the death the moment his ambition was born. "Li Er, Qi Er is your brother. Give the antidote to him. Mother will protect you." The Empress Dowager was finally tired from crying and said in a hoarse voice. Mo Jingli's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Mother, after being the Empress Dowager for more than 10 years, you are even more naive than before." The Empress Dowager was stunned. She coldly looked at the familiar yet strange son in front of her, as if she didn't know him. Mo Jingli lightly said, "Not to mention that I don't have the antidote, even if I did. I wouldn't give it. Mother, do you really think that if Mo Jingqi was cured, he would let me go?" The Empress Dowager was so angry by his heartless words that she trembled. She pointed at Mo Jingli and angrily said, You bastard. You. A lifetime of fighting for power. Now that she was over 60 years old, she was really tired. She only hoped that her two sons would be safe and sound. But why did she have to watch her two sons kill each other in her 60 years of age? Was this really retribution? Mo Jingli indifferently smiled and said, "Since it's like this, why didn't Mother follow that old man surnamed Liu's wishes and just lock Son up? In Mother's eyes, isn't there something more important than your son?" The Empress Dowager silently pointed at Mo Jingli and couldn't say anything for a while. That's right. In her heart, there was still something more important than her son, which was power. If Chia couldn't make it, then Leah couldn't have anything happen to him. Otherwise, if something happened to Chi, one of the two princes born by noble consort Liu would ascend the throne. The Empress Dowager had always been on bad terms with noble consort Liu's family. If noble consort Liu's son became the emperor, what good would it bring her? Even though the Empress Dowager was noble, her grandmother was far less intimate than her mother. Moreover, noble consort Liu's son was not close to her. But even so, it didn't mean that she was willing to let her younger son kill her elder son. You. The Empress Dowager looked at her gloomy son in front of her and found that she didn't know what to say. Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows and said, "Mother, don't worry. I won't kill him. He is still my brother, isn't he?" Of course, he wouldn't kill Mo Jingqi. He wanted him to lie on the bed unable to move and watch as he held power in his hands and even ruled over the world. More importantly, he couldn't let Mo Jingqi die too suddenly. Even though Mo Xiaoyao had severed ties with the Da Chu state, Mo Jingli wasn't sure if he would use Mo Jingqi's death as an excuse to attack the Da Chu state. From beginning to end, Mo Jingli had never believed that Mo Xiaoyao didn't have ambition. He just lacked an excuse to realize his ambition. Chapter 573. Because of the Emperor's serious illness, the entire palace was gloomy even before the new year. In the past few days, King Li's faction and Prime Minister Liu's faction had been fighting both openly and secretly. Everyone who was well informed knew why the emperor had fallen ill. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the golden throne in the hall. Even the request for help from Zijing Pass was ignored. Mo Jingqi was lying on the bed. He was muddle-headed every day. It was difficult for him to even take care of himself, let alone deal with the affairs of the court. "Prince." The eunuch guarding outside the bedchamber had curled up his hands and feet to keep warm because of the cold weather. Seeing the man in brocade striding over, he hurriedly went forward to salute with a flattering smile on his face. Mo Jingli looked at the eunuch in front of him proudly and said coldly, "I have something to discuss with my royal brother." The eunuch was stunned and said awkwardly, "But now the emperor." Mo Jingli glanced around and said coldly, "What? I want to see my royal brother. Do I need your permission?" The eunuchs at the door were all shocked. They had received orders from Imperial Concubine and Prime Minister Liu to prevent King Li from entering, but no one knew the situation in the palace now. King Li was powerful now. They couldn't afford to offend him. After hesitating and deceiving, the eunuchs finally retreated and said with a flattering smile, "We don't dare. Prince, please." Mo Jingli snorted and stepped into the bedchamber. The bright yellow and luxurious furnishings came into sight. Mo Jingli's eyes shook slightly. Looking at Mo Jingqi lying on the bed silently, Mo Jingli suddenly felt a trace of indescribable pleasure. He knew Mo Jingqi wasn't asleep. He walked to the bedside and looked down at the sallow and emaciated man on the bed. A satisfied smile appeared on his face. The secret medicine he got from Nanjiang was much more effective than the so-called 5 minerals powder. He didn't feel anything when taking it, but once he stopped taking it, it was 100 times more effective than the 5 minerals powder. It had only been a few days, but Mo Jingqi had already become so skinny. After thinking about it, Mo Jingli stuffed an extremely small pill into Mo Jingqi's mouth. Mo Jingqi's dark and dazed eyes gradually regained a trace of light. When he saw the person standing in front of his window, his eyes flashed with anger, and his throat gurgled. Mo Jingli remained calm and unruffled. He tilted his head and asked, "What does Imperial Brother want to say?" You still dare to come?" Mo Jingqi hissed. He hadn't spoken or eaten anything for several days, so his throat was dry and hoarse. Mo Jingli laughed, "Why wouldn't I dare to come? Imperial Brother, I'm worried about you." Mo Jingqi glared angrily at the person in front of him, as if he wanted to bite him to death. Mo Jingli leisurely walked to the bed and sat down. Looking at Mo Jingqi's angry expression, a strange smile appeared on his face. "Imperial Brother, you really shouldn't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame Imperial Mother. If she hadn't instilled those thoughts in me in order to suppress you, if she hadn't supported me to fight against you for her own power. Who knows, maybe we're still a pair of good brothers who respect each other. Imperial Brother, do you know how much of a failure you are as a person? Look at you. Imperial Mother wants to deal with you, Imperial Brother wants to deal with you, the Imperial family ignores you. You think they don't know that your illness is strange? But did they ask? If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too cruel to the Imperial family. That's why no one is willing to help you when you're in trouble. Even your favorite noble consort Liu and the Liu family. Hehe, I'm afraid they already have their own plans. Mo Jingqi opened his eyes wide, revealing a look of disbelief. Mo Jingli didn't care and asked leisurely, has noble consort Liu come to see you these days? No. That's right, noble consort Liu's heart is all on Mo Xiaoyao. Why would she come to see you at this time? The Liu family is helping to put noble consort Liu's son on the throne. Mo Jingqi was so angry that his face turned blue. He wanted to roar, but his body didn't even have the strength to roar. Mo Jingli continued, Imperial brother, do you know, if I, your younger brother, ascend to the throne, you may still have a way to live. After all, even if it's for the sake of Imperial mother and Mo Xiaoyao, younger brother will still let you live. But if noble consort Liu's son ascends to the throne, I promise you won't live for more than a month. After all, if there's a retired emperor above the little emperor, how can noble consort Liu be the empress dowager who governs from behind a curtain? Imperial brother, you didn't expect your cold and arrogant noble consort to have such ambition, did you? Do you know why she wants to govern from behind a curtain? Ha ha. She wants to control the entire Da Chu state and then compete with Yi Li for Mo Xiaoyao. What an infatuated woman. Don't you think so, Imperial brother? What? Mo Jingqi's face turned green and red. Finally, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He laid on the bed and didn't even have the strength to get up. This mouthful of blood covered his neck and the front of his robes. Even the lower half of his face was covered in blood. He looked terrible and pitiful. The emperor of a generation had fallen to this state. It was easy to imagine the anger and sorrow in his heart. Mo Jingli looked at him without a trace of pity in his eyes. How is it? Imperial brother, have you thought it through? Mo Jingqi stared at him for a long time, then suddenly laughed. Mo Jingli narrowed his eyes in displeasure at the sight of the blood-stained face and that eerie smile. Mo Jingqi panted for a while before opening his mouth to say, You want to force this one to do it? Little brother. Don't forget that I am the older brother. The methods you used on that side were all left over from this one. Back then. This one really shouldn't have shown mercy to you. Mo Jingli knit his brows. Seeing Mo Jingqi's smile, his heart felt a bit uneasy. At this point, he really couldn't think of any other methods Mo Jingqi could have. Mo Jingli's brows furrowed tightly as he stared at the messy man on the bed. Mo Jingqi looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. He slowly said, Jingli, after all these years, you only have one child, right? Mo Jingli slightly narrowed his eyes. He didn't understand why he would mention this at this time. He only heard Mo Jingqi slowly say, If this one says that you will only have one child in this lifetime, what will you do? What will you do? What do you mean? Mo Jingli's expression changed. He stepped forward and grabbed Mo Jingqi's collar to pull him up from the bed. For a man, having an heir was sometimes more important than having power. Although many people could sacrifice their children for power, that was because they had many children. If they didn't have a single one, then all the power and status in the world would immediately decrease by more than half. Sitting on the throne but not being able to pass it to one's own son was like a person who had painstakingly saved up a lifetime of money, only to end up benefiting someone else's son. Although Mo Jingli didn't have a son, his only son, Yi Ying's child, was indeed young and sickly. He wasn't even 7 years old, but people were always worried that he wouldn't live past the age of 20. Hearing Mo Jingqi say this, Mo Jingli's heart shook. He fiercely stared at Mo Jingqi and said, What did you do? No. You couldn't have had the chance to drug me. Mo Jingli wasn't someone who didn't have his guard up. In fact, he was more guarded against his older brother than anyone else. Normally, he was especially careful with his food, clothing, housing, and transportation. Mo Jingli wouldn't have had the chance to drug him. Chapter 574. Mo Jingqi chuckled. Seeing his younger brother's angry appearance made his mood very good. Jingli, you should thank Shen for letting you keep a child. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for not being a good prince and going against Shen. Mo Jingli's face was dark. After a long time, he suddenly sneered, You also said that I still have a son. Do you believe that I won't kill all of your sons one by one? Mo Jingqi did not care about his threat at all. He smiled faintly. Do you really think that the one in your fu is your son? Jingli, you don't know. When Princess Consort Li gave birth to that child, Zhen personally held him. That is a white, tender, and sturdy little boy. That sickly child of yours is not even half as big as him. Bastard. Mo Jingli was furious. He fiercely threw Mo Jingqi back onto the bed. Then he pounced forward and grabbed his neck, shouting angrily, "Where did you take Ai's son? Speak." Mo Jingqi seemed to not see the hand tightly strangling his neck. His waxy yellow face was red from choking. He still had his eyes half closed and did not care. In the end, Mo Jingli could only let him go in defeat. He could not really kill Mo Jingqi now. At that time, he would not need the throne. He would become a monarch killer. Looking at the person lying on the bed, Mo Jingli sneered, "You won't say anything? You think that I don't have a way to deal with you? I will kill a prince a day for you to see. There will be a day when you will speak." Mo Jingqi opened his eyes and looked at him. He calmly said, "Zhen is about to die, how can I control them? Even if you kill all of Zhen's sons, so what? Chang'e is still in the northwest. Even if she is a daughter, she is still Zhen's blood. As for you, you are destined to have no descendants. As long as you kill a prince, I guarantee that your son will be sent to your dining table the next morning." At this point, Mo Jingli had to admit that he was not as ruthless as his brother. "What do you want? You should know that your body will never recover. Do you think you'll be safe and sound if you give the throne to noble consort Liu?" In order to be absolutely safe, he would never use the antidote. When noble consort Liu was mentioned, Mo Jingqi's eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness. He lowered his eyes and pondered for a while before saying, "What I want to do has nothing to do with you." Not long after, Mo Jingqi's decree came from the palace. Noble consort Liu's eldest son, Mo Jingli, was conferred the title of Crown Prince. In addition, Prince Li, Mo Jingli, was conferred the title of Prince Regent. Once the imperial edict was released, the entire court was naturally shocked, but they did not understand the emperor's intentions. The courtiers who wanted to pick a side were also confused. Should they choose the Crown Prince or Prince Li? Inside the Li prince's mansion when Mo Jingli returned to the residence, Yi Ying and Princess Xixia came to greet him. Princess Xixia was still as beautiful as a flower, bright and moving. In comparison, Yi Ying looked much paler and thinner. The young woman who was just in her early 20s looked like she was nearing her 30s. She was holding the hand of a boy who looked less than 5 years old. However, everyone in the Prince Ding mansion knew that this prince and princess consort Liu's pampered little heir was already 7 years old this year. "Prince, congratulations to Prince for being conferred the title of Prince Regent. From now on, you have great power in your hands." Princess Xixia's smile was bright and charming. She looked sincere and happy, but she did not deliberately flatter him. This made Mo Jingli, who originally had a dark expression, unable to help but reveal a trace of a smile. A trace of jealousy flashed through Yi Ying's eyes. She led her son forward and said with a smile, "Chunxia and the little heir also congratulate Prince for being conferred the title of Prince Regent." After saying this, she slightly pinched the little heir's hand, indicating for him to speak. The little child's face was pale, and his body was so weak that it looked like he could fall over with a gust of wind. He leaned close to Yi Ying's side, as if he was very afraid of his father, Mo Jingli. Yi Ying secretly gritted her teeth. She really did not understand. She and Mo Jingli were not cowardly people. Why was it that this son of theirs was as timid as a mouse? Even his own father was afraid of him. The child timidly raised his head. His voice was as soft as a mosquito's as he called out to his father. Then, he had nothing else to say. Mo Jingli looked at the cowering child in front of him and only felt the anger in his heart boil. It was as if it was about to burst out at any moment. How could such a weak and timid child be his, Mo Jingli's, son? He could not help but think of Mo Jingqi lying on the bed before he left the palace. Although he was very weak, his eyes were still filled with pride. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. His eyes that stared at the child seemed to be about to spit fire. Prince. Yi Ying looked at Mo Jingli with some confusion. At this moment, of course, she could tell that Mo Jingli was not happy because he had become the Prince Regent. In fact, he was very angry now. Yi Ying carefully supported her son who wanted to hide behind her out of fear and asked carefully. Mo Jingli coldly snorted, sending the child flying with a kick. After he sent people to investigate carefully, he found out that the midwives during Yi Ying's delivery were all arranged by Mo Jingqi. After Yi Ying gave birth, everyone in the manor had been replaced. No one knew where they went. Mo Jingli knew that Mo Jingqi was not lying. The sickly child in front of him was not his son at all. He really did not look like himself or Yi Ying. He was not ugly, but it was definitely obvious that even if he grew up, he would only be an ordinary-looking child. Prince! Yi Ying screamed. All the servants and maids present, including Princess Shi Xia, were shocked. Yi Ying pounced on the child. The child fell to the ground and vomited 2 mouthfuls of blood. He could not even cry. It looked like he was about to die. Yi Ying was so frightened that she almost did not dare to touch the child. She could only scream, "Son! Quick! Quick! Go to the imperial physician." The servants came to their senses and looked at Mo Jingli hesitantly. The little heir was kicked by the prince. It was naturally up to the prince to call for the imperial physician. Although most people did not know medicine, they could tell that the little heir had been weak and sickly since he was young. After being kicked so hard by the prince, it was obvious that he was about to die. "You are not allowed to go," Mo Jingli said coldly. Yi Ying looked up at Mo Jingli in shock. Tears hung on her face. She was momentarily at a loss. Prince! Prince! Mo Jingli's hatred for Yi Ying had reached its peak. This woman could not do anything right. Back then, he had really gone crazy to want to marry her. And because of that, he missed the opportunity. He went forward, grabbed Yi Ying, and dragged her into the courtyard. Yi Ying kept struggling. She looked at the dying child and cried endlessly. "No! Prince, the child." Mo Jingli's figure was behind the screen wall. Everyone present looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Princess Shi Xia looked at the child on the ground. A gloating smile appeared on her lips. She waved her hand and said, "Let's wait until the prince is done with his work." Yi Ying, who was being dragged away by Mo Jingli, struggled all the way. However, how could a weak woman like her break free? Yi Ying was dragged back into the room by Mo Jingli. He pushed her hard. She lost her balance and bumped into the table in the room. Yi Ying looked up and said with tears in her eyes, "Prince, why did you do that? That's our child. How could you be so heartless?" "Shut up," Mo Jingli said coldly. He stared coldly at Yi Ying and said, "You're such an incompetent fool. You didn't even know that your child was swapped. You let I raise a bastard from who knows where for 7 years. Yi Ying was stunned. She could not understand the meaning of Mo Jingli's words. Mo Jingli stared at her and said coldly, "Don't you understand? That sickly child is not I's son at all. That child was swapped when he was born. How could it be? That's impossible." Yi Ying cried out involuntarily. The son she had carefully taken care of for several years was not her biological son. Then where did the child she gave birth to go? "Prince, then, where is our child?" Yi Ying asked anxiously. Mo Jingli said hatefully, in Mo Jingqi's hands. Hearing that, Yi Ying fell onto the chair weakly. All these years, she was well aware of the relationship between Mo Jingli and Mo Jingqi. Now that the child had fallen into Mo Jingqi's hands, would there be a day she could get it back? Yi Ying grabbed Mo Jingli's clothes in a panic and cried, "Prince, save our child. Ying'er begs you to save our child." Sob sob. My poor child. Mo Jingli pushed her away in annoyance. Of course, he would save the child. He had to save him. Looking coldly at Yi Ying who was crying by the table, Mo Jingli only felt that this once delicate and lovely woman was incomparably annoying. "From today onwards, you stay in the backyard and don't come out. I don't want to see you again." Yi Ying was stunned. She had just heard that her son had fallen into Mo Jingqi's hands, And now she was being grounded by Mo Jingli. How could she bear it? Why? Yi Ying looked at Mo Jingli absent-mindedly. All these years, she had already lost his love. If it were not for her son, she would have been forgotten long ago. The sweet love in the past was like a dream. Now, was she going to lose all that she had left? Mo Jingli said coldly, "If it weren't for your stupidity, how could I not know the whereabouts of my son for so many years? Do you know what I have lost because of your stupidity? Back then, mother was right. You are indeed a stupid and incompetent woman. If I didn't marry you back then." Thinking of the gentle woman he had seen once in City last year, Mo Jingli couldn't help but feel a sense of regret. After so many years, she was still as elegant as an orchid, graceful and elegant. If it were her, this would never have happened. After taking one last look at Yi Ying, Mo Jingli left without any reluctance. Leaving behind Yi Ying, who was in a daze, silently crying. After a long time, the sound of sobbing finally came from the room. Chapter 575. In an inconspicuous courtyard in the Chu capital, Lung Haoyu sat in the study with a gloomy expression. Murong Ting walked in with a cup of ginseng tea. When she saw the green shadow under his eyelids, she couldn't help but frown. What happened? Why are you in such a difficult situation? Last night, Lung Haoyu had been acting strangely after receiving a letter. He didn't sleep the whole night and just sat in the study in a daze. If it was a few years ago, Murong Ting would have grabbed him and scolded him. However, after being married for a few years and living together, Murong Ting's impression of Lung Haoyu was no longer the idle playboy. Moreover, after becoming a wife and mother, her temper had obviously improved a lot. Putting the ginseng tea on the table, Murong Ting looked down at the letter on the table. Lung Haoyu didn't intend to hide it from her. He opened the letter and placed it on the table. It turned out that it was a letter sent by Lung Huai from Zijing Pass. Zijing Pass was now in urgent need of provisions, but the imperial court was busy with major events. Prime Minister Liu's faction and Prince Li's faction were in full swing, so no one paid attention to the letter sent by Lung Huai for help. Murong Ting frowned and sneered. Does eunuch really think of us as a national treasury? He doesn't even know if you have the ability to ask for 100,000 dan of provisions. Where are we going to get it for him? It was naturally not difficult for Lung Haoyu to get 100,000 dan of provisions, but that was the property of the Prince Ding mansion. It was not something that Lung Haoyu could use at will. Moreover, although the outside world knew that Lung Haoyu had been doing business outside for a few years, it would be strange if they weren't targeted by people from all walks of life if he casually gave out 100,000 dan of provisions. The Prince Ding mansion and the Da Chu state no longer had anything to do with each other. Without Prince Ding's personal consent, who would dare to use provisions to support the Da Chu state's army? However, Murong Ting also understood Lung Haoyu's dilemma. No matter how much Lung Huai ignored Lung Haoyu, he was still Lung Haoyu's biological father. Murong Ting also felt conflicted about the Da Chu state. Lung Haoyu was a member of the Prince Ding mansion, so Murong Ting was naturally a member of the Prince Ding mansion. However, her father, Murong Shen, was a general who guarded the borders of Da Chu state. They were of the same bloodline. How could it be so easy to cut them off? Looking at her husband's haggard and tired appearance, Murong Ting could only sigh helplessly and comfort him. We have already sent the news to the northwest. I think the prince's consort will reply soon. Father-in-law's side won't be unable to hold on for a few days. Lung Haoyu forced a smile. He leaned against the chair and reached out to hold his wife's hand on his shoulder. He apologized. I've made you worry. Murong Ting rolled her eyes at him and said, What are you talking about? We're husband and wife. If I'm not worried about you, who am I worried about? If you have the time to sit here and worry, you might as well have a good sleep. What if Prince Ding gives you some orders? You won't be able to handle it even if you're tired. Lung Haoyu smiled helplessly. How could he not understand the logic? It was just that the person who was experiencing the rain of swords and spears on the battlefield right now was his father. Although his father only had his eldest brother in his eyes since he was young, It was undeniable that in his heart, he had always longed for his father's recognition. That was why he and Feng San became good friends. They both longed for their father's gaze and recognition but had never received it. It was just that Feng San was more carefree and more decisive than him. Reporting to young Master Leng, Prince's secret letter has arrived. Someone outside the door reported in a low voice. Leng Haoyu stood up in surprise and said loudly, "Come in quickly." He didn't know what Prince's decision was, but he hoped to know the result as soon as possible. The man outside the door whispered a sealed letter and then left. Leng Haoyu opened the letter and read it 10 lines at a glance. A trace of joy flashed through his eyes. Murong Ting only needed to look at his expression to know that it was a good result. She couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although she hated the Leng family, she didn't want them to die. At least, she didn't want Leng Huai to die like this. Otherwise, Leng Haoyu would definitely be sad. Leng Haoyu finished reading the letter and raised his head. Murong Ting asked, "How is it? What did Prince Ding say?" Leng Haoyu thought for a while and said, "Ting go to Marquis Muyang's residence in a while." Just like the Leng family, Marquis Muyang's residence has outstanding military achievements for generations. Now that the border is in danger, it's time for them to contribute. Murong Ting frowned and said, "Marquis Muyang has already had the intention to retire in the past few years. Can Yaoji persuade him?" Leng Haoyu sneered and said, "If he can't, isn't there still Muyang?" Murong Ting nodded and said, "I know. I haven't seen Marquis Muyang's heir consort for some time. I'll get someone to send a letter over later." Leng Haoyu nodded and smiled. "There's another good news." Murong Ting raised her eyebrows and looked at him with a smile. Leng Haoyu said in a low voice, "Prince and Princess will be coming to the capital in a few days." Hearing this, Murong Ting was shocked. At this time, Prince and Princess. Leng Haoyu laughed in a low voice. "Li City has Mr. Hongyu and young Master Qingchen overseeing it. Outside, there are generals and hundreds of thousands of Mohist army stationed. Where can't Prince and Princess go?" Prince and Princess plan to bring the little heir back to sweep the tombs of the previous kings. In addition, didn't they say that Mo Jingqi is about to die? Prince said that he wants to send him off. Since Prince Ding and Li Er decided to come, they naturally had plans for their safety. Thinking of Yi Li, who she hadn't seen for a few years, Murong Ting's brows also showed some joy. Yaoji hadn't been in the Chu capital for long. At most, it had only been half a year. But in this half a year, she had successfully turned herself from a lonely woman with a child into the most favored concubine of Marquis Muyang's mansion. Although there was no lack of Prince Ding Mansion's forces paving the way for her behind the scenes, it also showed that Yaoji's skills were outstanding. Now, the son she gave birth to was the eldest grandson of Marquis Muyang's mansion and Muyang's only son. Just this alone was enough for her to stand tall in Marquis Muyang's mansion. Yaoji wasn't a high-profile person. Even if she was favored, she wasn't domineering. This made Marquis Muyang's wife, who originally looked down on her background, unable to find any weakness. This made Marquis Muyang's wife so angry that she almost broke her teeth. She only regretted that she didn't kill this scourge back then. Unfortunately, Muyang was very protective, and Yaoji wasn't a kind and ignorant person. After entering the mansion for a few months, the two had fought several times, and Marquis Muyang's wife didn't have the slightest advantage. Yaoji's clothes were languid in front of the window. The colorful clothes on her didn't have the slightest sense of vulgarity. It only made people feel that she was beautiful. It was nearly 30 years old, but she was still beautiful and intoxicating. A handsome child of 6 or 7 years old sat beside her, quietly and obediently reading a book. Yaoji lowered her head and looked at him with eyes full of affection and heartache. Of course, this wasn't really her child. Her child would still stay in the Northwest and live an ordinary life. He would have a pair of loving parents and would have no worries about food and clothing for the rest of his life. He wouldn't know that he had a father who was Marquis Muyang's son, nor would he know that he had a mother who used to be a dancer. That was good. This child was naturally not an ordinary person. He was a child raised in Prince Ding Mansion. The shadow guard who originally guarded the Prince Ding mansion for generations was selected and trained from such children. Now the shadow guard system was gradually changing, but it still needed some special people to carry out some special tasks. This child in front of her came with Yaoji this time. After getting along with him for half a year, Yaoji sincerely treated this child as her own and loved him. She couldn't raise her own child by her side, so she was especially soft-hearted to other children. Chapter 576. This was the scene Mu Yang saw when he came in. A beautiful woman lovingly looked at the child who was reading with his head lowered. The light of the setting sun shone through the window, adding some warmth to the cold winter. Mu Yang saw this and felt warmth in his heart. The smile on his face deepened. "Liar, are you studying?" Mu Yang walked up and asked with a smile. The child named Mu Lai put away his book and stood up. He respectfully said, "Father." Mu Yang lovingly patted Mu Lai's head and said with a smile, "Teacher assigns a lot of homework. I know you work hard, but you can't be too tired." A trace of embarrassment and shyness flashed across Mu Lai's small face, but there was more joy. He nodded and said, "I'm not tired. Thank you for your concern." Mu Yang only felt that his son was very sensible and felt comforted. Good child. Mu Yang truly loved his son who had been missing for 6 years. Because she felt guilty, she wasn't very strict with him. Mu Yang looked at Yaoji who was sitting on the side and watching the two indifferently. He smiled softly and said, "What are you doing in the afternoon? If you're bored, you can go out for a walk." Yaoji shook her head and said, "There's nothing to see. I'll just accompany Lai in the courtyard. If I go out, it'll be a disaster." A trace of guilt flashed across Mu Yang's face. He knew that she did not come back willingly. If it wasn't for her son, she would never have come back. Mu Yang felt a sharp pain in his heart when he thought of the haggard Yaoji carrying the seriously ill Mu Lai in front of him a few months ago. So even though Yaoji was always indifferent to him, he still felt very satisfied. As long as the mother and son were by his side, everything would be perfect. Yaoji looked at him in a daze and lowered her eyes. "You seem to be busy these days." Mu Yang smiled and said, "I've been busy these days. I haven't eaten with you and Lai for 2 days." It was rare for Yaoji to ask about him. Mu Yang only thought that she was concerned about him and his smile deepened. He casually told Yaoji about these days. "You also know that the court is very chaotic these days. Our family was loyal to the emperor, but now that the emperor was seriously ill, it was still unknown who would win the battle between the Liu family and Li Wang. At this time, if they chose to stand on a side, it would be good if they won, but if they lost, they would be doomed eternally. These days, Prince Li's men and Liu clan's men had been trying their best to rope in Marquis Muyang. Although Marquis Muyang had yet to react, he probably wouldn't be able to hold on for long. At this time, not many people could choose to stay out of this. It was not that they did not want to, but that they could not. A few days ago, I heard that General Lung was trapped in the Purple Thorns Pass. Is it because the people of the northern region have already retreated? Yaoji asked carelessly. Mu Yang smiled bitterly and said, "The people of the northern region came prepared. They have a strong army and strong horses. How can they retreat so easily? General Lung is barely holding on." While they were talking, Mu Yang suddenly stopped and pondered. Yaoji didn't look at him. She casually leaned against the window and said, "The enemy is about to reach the city. I don't know what else these people can do. Are they fighting to be the ruler of the fallen country?" Mu Yang smiled bitterly and looked at Yaoji, saying, "You can't talk nonsense." But he knew Yaoji's temperament and couldn't bear to lightly blame her. At the same time, he agreed with Yaoji's words. The battle at the Purple Thorns Pass was dangerous, but Prince Li and Liu clan only cared about fighting for power. Once the Purple Thorns Pass was broken, it would be a flat land from the north to the capital. In less than 2 days, the northern Jin army would reach the city. If at this time, the Mu clan was guarding the border like the Lung clan, they might be able to get out of this battle. As long as the Purple Thorns Pass was defended, the Mu clan would be the hero who won in the future. Thinking of this, Mu Yang couldn't wait. He said softly to Yaoji and Mu Lai, I still have something to deal with. I won't accompany you for dinner tonight. I'll come to see you tomorrow. Then he turned and walked out. Behind him, Mu Lai said respectfully, Father, take care. After sending Mu Yang away, the well-behaved Mu Lai looked up at Yaoji, who was sitting by the window, and frowned. Don't tell me you still like this man? He's far worse than Commander Qin. Yaoji was stunned. She patted his head and said, You're just a kid. What do you know about liking or not? Mu Yang curled his lips and frowned. He showed a mocking expression and said, Of course I know. He obviously has a wife, but he still shows deep affection for you. But when his wife and mother bully you, he can't help. He only knows how to curry favor with them afterwards. He can't even control his wife and protect the person he likes. If he's not a good-for-nothing, what is he? Yaoji looked at him in surprise and said, Are you really only 7 years old? Mu Yang rolled his eyes and said, I'm already 11 years old. Don't you know? He just didn't grow tall because he practiced martial arts too early. But the doctor had said that he would start to grow crazily when he was 14 or 15 years old. It wouldn't affect his height when he grew up. Yaoji was speechless. 11 years old was still a kid. Looking at the kid who was staring at her with a serious face, Yaoji smiled faintly and said, Don't worry. I know what to do and what not to do. Prince Ding and Princess Consort gave me a new lease of life. I won't ruin their plans. Mu Lai nodded with satisfaction and said, That's more like it. Don't worry, I'll make sure you go back to see your son safely. Yaoji couldn't help but smile and said, Thank you very much. Mu Lai snorted and turned his face away uncomfortably. Yaoji looked back out the window with a faint smile on her lips. She and Mu Yang had cut off all ties as early as when she took her child and fled the Chu capital. In the future, they would just serve different masters. Mu Yang's actions were indeed fast. She didn't know how Marquis Mu Yang persuaded the Liu family and Prince Li's people. 3 days later, Mu Yang took 200,000 men and provisions and set off for Zijing Pass. Before he left, Mu Yang turned back and saw Yaoji holding Mu Lai's hand and watching him leave. Looking at the faint smile on Yaoji's lips, Mu Yang's heart suddenly skipped a beat for some reason. A faint uneasiness spread in his heart. When he looked again, he couldn't see Yaoji's face clearly. He only saw her standing in his direction, and Mu Lai even raised his small hand and waved at him. Mu Yang shook his head and smiled faintly in his heart. He was thinking too much when he was about to go to war. A few days later, a group of men and horses escorted a carriage into the capital. The carriage stopped at the busiest inn in the capital. The neatly arranged guards of nearly 30 people couldn't help but raise their eyebrows. The curtain of the carriage was lifted and a white-clothed figure came out and landed lightly on the ground. The passers-by couldn't help but gasp in surprise. It was the end of the first month. It wasn't even the beginning of spring in the Chu capital. It was so cold that people couldn't help but shiver. This man was dressed in a white silk robe. He looked confident and elegant, as if he couldn't feel the cold at all. But the most eye-catching thing was his long silver hair. There was only one person in the world with silver hair and such elegance. The people who were secretly guessing only felt their hearts pounding. It was just that Prince Ding was disfigured in his early years and didn't go out. Not many people in the capital knew what he looked like. Therefore, suspicion could only remain suspicion. After the man got out of the carriage, he turned around and stretched out his hand. The person who came out was a beautiful woman wearing an autumn-colored cloak with white fox edges. The woman was no more than 20 years old. Her bearing and demeanor couldn't be compared to the ladies of the big families in the capital. Just looking at her from afar gave people a feeling of elegance and magnanimity. Before the people had time to marvel at this pair of beauties, another small head popped out of the carriage. A 5 or 6-year-old boy wearing a black brocade robe came out of the carriage. His collar and sleeves were inlaid with white fox edges, which contrasted with the black brocade robe. The child's white and tender little face was even more adorable and moving. The little boy gave the woman an innocent and cute smile. Even the people watching from afar couldn't help but feel their hearts itch. They wished that this cute and obedient child was their own. Seeing Mo Xiaobao reaching out his little hand to ask for a hug, Mo Xiaoyao stopped Yi Li's hand from reaching out and lightly said, "Be careful not to catch a cold." He reached out and hugged Mo Xiaobao tightly in his arms. That action definitely couldn't be called gentle. Mo Xiaobao uncomfortably twisted his body and received a pat from Mo Xiaoyao on the butt. Mo Xiaobao obediently laid in Mo Xiaoyao's arms. Father was the most annoying. It was not comfortable to hug him. Yi Li gave a faint smile and said, "How can it be that cold?" Although her internal strength wasn't as strong as Mo Xiaoyao's and she didn't need to wear too many clothes in the winter, Yi Li believed that she was more resistant to the cold than normal people. Moreover, it wasn't that cold in the northwest, so the capital couldn't be colder than the northwest. With such a large entourage outside, the innkeeper naturally came out to welcome them. With a glance, he could tell that this group of guests were rich and noble. Although he was curious about Mo Xiaoyao's white hair, he still politely led them into the inn. He didn't dare to ask the guests to register at the counter. The innkeeper said as he walked, "Young master and madam, this way please. This small inn has 2 high-quality courtyards. I wonder if young master and madam will be staying in the small courtyard or in this kind of first-class inn. Other than the heaven, earth, and mortal rooms, there was a separate courtyard that was even better than the heaven rooms. The price was naturally more than 10 times more expensive than the heaven rooms. There were maids and servants inside. Mo Xiaoyao lightly said, "I want both courtyards." The innkeeper was overjoyed and his smile became even more eager. He quickly said, "Yes, yes, yes. Young master and madam, this way please. I wonder what young master's surname is so this one can register for young master." Mo Xiaoyao stopped and looked at him lightly. Mo Xiaoyao. Young master Mo, that's a good surname. Mo. Ah. The innkeeper who was about to say a few more words with a wide smile suddenly realized that Mo Xiaoyao's name was quite unique. As a result, he slipped and fell to the ground. He raised his head to look at the tall white-haired man in front of him and cried out, "Your Highness Prince Ding?" Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "That's I." Chapter 577. In the inn, the innkeeper forced himself to lead Mo Xiaoyao and the others into the guest courtyard. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he fell to the ground. His legs were weak and he couldn't get up. If it was in the past, being able to receive Prince Ding's family was naturally his inn's supreme honor. But now, when he thought of the relationship between Prince Ding and the imperial family, he couldn't help but tremble. He didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse. But looking at the 2 indifferent guards guarding the courtyard door, the innkeeper didn't have the guts to inform them. His heart trembled, but he still got up from the ground and went back to the front with a sad face. In the end, Mo Xiaoyao and the others appeared at the entrance of the inn and were seen by so many people passing by. In less than half a day, the news that Prince Ding had returned to the capital and was staying at the most luxurious inn in the capital had spread throughout the capital. Naturally, it also spread to the mansions of the nobles and the imperial palace. As for how many people were sad and happy, and how many people were so scared that they dropped the things in their hands, outsiders didn't know. Just as everyone was panicking and having their own thoughts, in the elegant courtyard behind the inn, Leng Haoyu was complaining to Mo Xiaoyao with a bitter face, "Prince, even if you want to return to the capital, you don't have to be so high profile. Even if you want to be high profile, you don't have to stay at the inn. It's inconvenient for us to go in and out." He was different from Feng-san, who openly showed that he was from the Prince Ding mansion. Even if he didn't get along with his family, he was still the second young master of the Leng family. He was just a businessman who had some friendship with Prince Ding because of his relationship with Feng-san. In addition, second Madame Leng and Princess Ding were close friends before they were married. Even so, there was no reason for them to visit Prince Ding as soon as he returned to the capital. So poor second young Master Leng, who was already over 30 years old, still had to bring his wife and daughter over the wall. Yi Li and Murong Ting sat on the side. Hearing Leng Haoyu's complaints, they couldn't help but look at each other and smile. Although they hadn't seen each other for several years, their feelings for each other hadn't changed at all. The two of them sat on the side and chatted softly while watching the two children playing at the side. Lung Haoyu and Murongting's son was 2 years younger than little treasure Mo and was named Lung Junhan. The 3-year-old child looked very similar to Lung Haoyu. At such a young age, one could tell that he was somewhat handsome. However, compared to Mo Xiaobao's mischievous personality, Lung Junhan was more like an obedient and soft little bun. The little bun Lung Junhan seemed to hit it off with Xiaobao Mo. She ran around behind Xiaobao without hesitation, calling him brother. She was so well behaved. However, this kind of affinity was clearly one-sided. Xiaobao's eyes grew on the top of his head. Looking at this little bun who was hugged by his mother the moment they met, he was extremely displeased. He glared at her with his big round eyes, but Lung Junhan took it as a sign of intimacy. Brother, let's play together. Lung Junhan grew up alone and didn't have many friends to play with. Therefore, she was naturally very happy to see this very good-looking brother. Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes. Who would want to play with a silly little fool? He was even more stupid than his second uncles Xu Jirue. This prince won't play with a little kid who doesn't know anything. Mo Xiaobao. Yi Li gave him a warning look. Mo Xiaobao was most afraid of his mother being angry, so he could only hold out his hand for Lung Junhan to hold and said proudly, "Okay, this prince reluctantly agrees to play with you. Brother Xiaobao is the best. Play with Junhan." Lung Junhan held Mo Xiaobao's hand happily. The word brother Xiaobao immediately made Mo Xiaobao's face darken. He reached out a hand and pinched Lung Junhan's little cheek. "This prince is called Mo Yuchen. I reluctantly agree to you calling me brother Yuchen." Lung Junhan was at a loss. A 3-year-old child hadn't reached the point where he could understand whether the name was pleasant or not. It was obviously brother Xiaobao. Brother Xiaobao, Lung Haoyu on the side couldn't stand Mo Xiaobao bullying his son. He raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Oh, Prince Xiaobao, please take care of my Junhan." Mo Xiaobao's white and tender face suddenly turned red. He pointed at Lung Haoyu tremblingly for a while, then he stomped his feet and let go of Lung Junhan and ran away in tears. Lung Junhan, who was left behind, felt wronged. "Brother Xiaobao, don't call me Xiaobao." Mo Xiaobao's roar came from afar. Unfortunately, Lung Junhan, who was busy chasing after brother Xiaobao, didn't hear it. "Brother Xiaobao, wait for me." Seeing Lung Junhan chasing after Mo Xiaobao with her short legs, Murongting hurriedly called the nanny to follow and asked worriedly, "Is the little prince okay?" Yi Li understood her son's temperament and said with a smile, "Let him be. He'll be fine after a while." Lung Haoyu waved his folding fan and asked knowingly, "What's wrong with the little prince? I just called him Prince Xiaobao. He shouldn't have such a big reaction, right? He should be used to being called that in Glass City." Yi Li said with a smile, "It's nothing. He probably thinks that everyone in the world knows that his nickname is Mo Xiaobao. He found a place to hide and be sad." Hearing this, Murongting finally couldn't help but laugh out loud. She really couldn't understand why Prince Ding and Li Li, who looked like very proper and cultured people, would give their son such a funny name and even publicize it to everyone. If it was the child of an ordinary family, it would be fine. But Mo Xiaobao was the heir of the Prince Ding mansion. Yi Li was also very helpless. Who told Mo Xiaobao to have such a bad life and to have such an unscrupulous father? What does Prince think about the war between Da Chu State and the North? Lung Haoyu looked at Mo Xiaoyao and asked seriously. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes and said indifferently, "This is a matter between Da Chu State and the North. What does I think have to do with it?" Lung Haoyu hesitated for a moment and asked, "Prince means that our Prince Ding mansion won't interfere in this matter?" Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "The imperial family won't give us a chance to interfere in this matter. If you're worried about your father, then you should make plans as soon as possible. The Prince Ding mansion won't be of much help. If we interfere, it will only harm him." Lung Haoyu smiled bitterly and said indifferently, "What plans can I make? He has never thought of me, this good-for-nothing son of his, in his eyes. At most, I can only do my best to protect his life." Mo Xiaoyao nodded. Later, I'll have Qin Feng transfer 2 people to you. I'm afraid that Chu Jing won't be safe in the future. When the matter here is over, you should return to Glass City. Leng Haoyu's answer satisfied Mo Xiaoyao. As a superior, he naturally didn't like his subordinates to be so ruthless. After all, Leng Huai didn't care about Leng Haoyu, but he didn't have any enmity with him and was still his father. But at the same time, he didn't want Leng Haoyu to ruin his plans for Leng Huai. Leng Haoyu's face lit up with joy. Thank you, Prince. If he asked Qin Feng to transfer people, the one who would be transferred to him was naturally the elite of the elites, Qi Lin. With Qi Lin secretly protecting his father, even if his father was defeated in the future, Leng Haoyu was confident that he could bring his father back alive. Mo Xiaoyao waved his hand and asked with a frown, how is Mo Jingqi now? After Mo Jingli moved here, he actually didn't rush to ascend the throne. This isn't like his usual style. When he mentioned Mo Jingqi, Leng Haoyu didn't have a good impression of him. He didn't even want to pity him. Mo Jingqi won't die for a while. Mo Jingli probably wants to torture him. But Mo Jingli also has something on me. I'm in Mo Jingqi's hands, so in the end, we can only take a step back and let noble consort Liu's son be the crown prince. Chapter 578. Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow. Leng Haoyu said with a smile, originally, I didn't know what was going on either. However, I received news a few days ago that Mo Jingli kicked his only son on the first day he became regent. Everyone present was smart. Leng Haoyu's slight hint was enough to understand the crux of the matter. The child in the Li Palace isn't Mo Jingli's. Mo Jingli's son has been hidden. Mo Xiaoyao said slowly. After thinking for a moment, he continued, Mo Jingli doesn't seem like someone who would give up the throne for a child. The only possibility is, that is his only son. Speaking of which, other than Yi Ying, Mo Jingli hasn't had another child in all these years. Mo Jingli and Mo Xiaoyao were not the same. Mo Xiaoyao only had Yi Li as his wife. However, Mo Jingli's palace was filled with Wang Fei, secondary concubines, and Tongfang. This way, it was strange that there was only one child in all these years. There wasn't even anyone who was pregnant. Most likely, Mo Jingqi had done something to it. Murong Ting was speechless as she said, these 2 brothers are really strange. Although no one said anything, they all agreed with her point of view. Wasn't it strange? The 2 brothers had fought openly and covertly for so many years. Mo Jingqi had been poisoned by Mo Jingli to the point that he couldn't turn over a new leaf. However, Mo Jingli had almost lost his family line because of Mo Jingqi. Neither of them had gained an advantage. Speaking of Mo Jingqi and his brother, Leng Haoyu said worriedly, Mo Jingqi and Mo Jingli must already know that the prince has returned to the capital. Do the prince and Wang Fei want to move to another place? The inn isn't safe. Mo Xiaoyao waved his hand and said indifferently, it doesn't matter. At this time, none of them will act rashly. Just as they were talking, Zhuo Jing came in from outside and reported, Prince, Princess, Prince Li is outside asking for an audience. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and said calmly, he came quickly. Xiaobao angrily rushed out of the small courtyard and ran outside. This was a courtyard with 2 entrances, and there were guards both inside and outside. Although Mo Xiaobao was occasionally mischievous, he still had a sense of propriety. Of course, he knew that Chu Capital didn't need Glass City to let him do whatever he wanted. Therefore, no matter how angry he was, he wouldn't run outside. He would just sit under a big tree in the outer courtyard and grieve silently. Mo Xiaobao, whose nickname was publicized, felt that he had lost face. He pondered for a long time and finally decided, he also wanted to publicize his father's nickname. As for his father's nickname, Mo Xiaobao had not considered it. Brother Xiaobao. Leng Juanhan's voice came from afar. Obviously, little Junhan was still persistently looking for his new friend. Mo Xiaobao, who was nestled under his subordinates, felt his scalp tingle when he heard that soft brother Xiaobao. As long as he raised his head, he could see the expressions of the guards at the door. Mo Xiaobao only felt that the veins on his forehead were throbbing. Gritting his teeth, He looked at Lung Junhan, who was running out shakily to look for him. Mo Xiaobao finally stood up and said coldly, "Little dummy Leng, come here." Lung Junhan turned around and saw the beautiful brother Xiaobao standing under the tree and waving at him. He immediately showed a bright smile and ran towards Mo Xiaobao. Mo Xiaobao pinched Lung Junhan's cheeks and stared at him. "My name is Mo Yu Chen, did you hear clearly? Mo Yu Chen. Call me brother Yu Chen." Although he couldn't understand Mo Xiaobao's thoughts, Lung Junhan still intuitively discovered that brother Xiaobao was unhappy. I'm not called little dummy Leng." Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes. "I'm not called Mo Xiaobao either. But Aunt Wang Fei clearly called you Xiaobao." Mo Xiaobao glared at Lung Junhan fiercely. "Brother Yu Chen, do you hear me? If I don't call you, I won't take you to play." "Brother Yu Chen," Lung Junhan whispered. Mo Xiaobao nodded with satisfaction and patted Lung Junhan's little head. He said like an old man, "This is a good boy. You can be taught." Lung Junhan touched his little head and giggled. Brother Xiaobao was willing to take him to play. "Are you Mo Xiaoyao's son?" A somewhat cold voice came from not far away. Mo Xiaobao looked at the voice. A middle-aged man wearing a black embroidered golden python appearance stood a few steps away and stared at him. That somewhat cold and strange gaze made Mo Xiaobao a little uncomfortable, so Mo Xiaobao curled his lips and raised his chin proudly and asked, "It's me. Who are you? Wasn't it just a prince? Walking around in court clothes for fear that people didn't know his identity. His father was the most powerful prince." Mo Jingli didn't know that Mo Xiaobao could think so much with just one meeting. His gaze was somewhat complicated as he looked at the handsome child in black embroidered clothes in front of him. This child's appearance was more exquisite than Mo Xiaoyao's when he was young. The arrogance between his eyebrows was also more than Mo Xiaoyao's when he was young. It was obvious that he was a favored son who was doted on by his parents. Thinking of this, and thinking of his son who was nowhere to be found, Mo Jingli's face became gloomier. Mo Xiaobao stared at Mo Jingli unhappily. "How rude to not answer my question." Turning his head, Mo Xiaobao turned and left. "Little Dai Lung, let's go." "Little brother Yu Chen, I'm not little Dai Lung." Lung Junhan followed behind and emphasized as she chased after him. Mo Xiaobao nodded magnanimously and said, "I remember, little Dai Lung." Watching the two children leave hand in hand, Mo Jingli stood there with a gloomy expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Mo Jingli came out and said, "Prince Li, Prince's consort invites you." Mo Jingli snorted lightly and stepped inside. Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li were playing chess in the courtyard. Lung Haoyu and Mu Rongting naturally avoided them. Seeing Mo Jingli come in, Mo Xiaoyao didn't plan to get up to greet the guest. He glanced at him and said lightly, "What's the matter?" A trace of anger flashed across Mo Jingli's face. In front of Mo Xiaoyao, he seemed to always be inferior to him. In the past, Mo Xiaoyao was the second young master of the Prince Ding mansion. He was a prince, but he wasn't as favored as him. He wasn't as proud as him. He wasn't as arrogant as him. When he grew up, he was conferred the title of Prince Li. He didn't have his military achievements and talents. Now, he was the regent of Dachu state. In front of Mo Xiaoyao, he was still inferior to him. How could Mo Jingli be calm? "How dare you? You actually dare to come back?" Mo Jingli said coldly. Mo Xiaoyao casually threw down a chess piece and leaned against the chair with a faint smile. "I'm back." "What do you dare to do?" Mo Jingli gritted his teeth. What did he dare to do? He didn't dare to do anything. Now that Beijing had invaded, the northern tribes and Shilling were eyeing them covetously. Even if Mo Xiaoyao came back alone, he didn't dare to do anything to him. Once something happened to Mo Xiaoyao, the Mohist army would definitely come out in full force to avenge him. At that time, the Shilling and northern tribes would invade together. Dachu state would be surrounded by enemies on all sides. It wouldn't take long for them to swallow it whole. Snorting, seeing that Mo Xiaoyao had no intention of inviting him to sit, Mo Jingli walked to the empty chair on the side and sat down. He stared at Mo Xiaoyao and said, "You came back at this time. What exactly are you plotting?" Mo Xiaoyao snorted at his vigilance. "Plotting? Isn't that what you and Mo Jingqi are good at? How about it? Did you give Mo Jingqi enough medicine? If not, I still have some here. Mo Jingli's eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're talking about. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and said, You don't know? When you were buying medicine from that old woman in the Holy Land of Nanjiang, I and Lili happened to be watching. So we took some back for Mr. Shen to research. Do you think, in half a year, Mr. Shen will be able to develop an antidote? Mo Jingli glanced at Yi Li, who was calmly drinking tea, and suddenly felt inexplicably ashamed. But the meaning in Mo Xiaoyao's words made him even more uneasy. You have an antidote? Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows in surprise. Did I say that? Mo Xiaoyao. You. Mo Jingli was so angry that he wanted to throw the teacup in his hand at Mo Xiaoyao's face. In the past few years, his status and power had gradually risen, and he was rarely so irritable. But it seemed that a few casual words from Mo Xiaoyao could make him fly into a rage like he did when he was young. Mo Xiaoyao, what do you want? Mo Xiaoyao leisurely drank his tea, calmly saying, Calm down. Since you're already the regent, then act like one. Don't tarnish the reputation of the regent. His father had also been the regent in the past. Seeing Mo Jingli trying to suppress his anger, Mo Xiaoyao said, I don't want to do anything. I just heard that Mo Jingqi is about to die, so I came back to say goodbye. You mean that you won't leave until Mo Jingqi dies? Mo Jingli gritted his teeth. Right now, Chu Jing was in a mess, and they didn't need Prince Ding to mess things up. If Mo Jingqi didn't die in half a year, then wouldn't he have to stay in Chu Jing for half a year? Prince Li's uncle and big brother are both prodigies at governing a country. The Northwest is just a small piece of land, it won't be a problem for them. Prince I doesn't need to worry about me, Mo Xiaoyao said. I'm worried about you. Mo Jingli couldn't help but curse in his mind. What did the Northwest have to do with him? Right now, he just wanted to see Mo Xiaoyao get kicked out of Chu Jing. Mo Xiaoyao leaned back in his chair, one hand supporting his forehead as he looked at him. Don't think about how to get I to leave quickly. I don't have a hobby of coming and going. I will naturally leave when I'm happy. But don't worry, I definitely won't interfere in the battle between you and Mo Jingqi, or the Liu family. Mo Jingli sneered, You think I'll believe your words? Mo Xiaoyao spread his hands, What else can you do besides believe me? Chapter 579. Yi Li sat at the side, leisurely sipping her tea as she watched the two argue back and forth. It was clear that not only could Mo Jingli not compare to Mo Xiaoyao in terms of martial arts, but he also couldn't win against Mo Xiaoyao in terms of words. In the past, many people had told Yi Li about how arrogant Mo Xiaoyao was when he was young. However, the Mo Xiaoyao that Yi Li saw, especially the over 30-year-old Mo Xiaoyao, most of the time, was still calm and collected. Only now, Yi Li could see a trace of arrogance in Mo Xiaoyao's calm and relaxed demeanor. No wonder Mo Jingli was so angry that his face turned black. Mo Jingli took a deep breath and stared at Mo Xiaoyao. Fine, I believe your words. I won't interfere with your matters in Jing City, but you better not do anything unnecessary. Mo Xiaoyao looked up with disdain. Do you think that the little things you and Mo Jingqi play are very attractive? If I watch too much, I will be worried that it will hurt my brain. Mo Jingli didn't argue with Mo Xiaoyao. He knew that he couldn't win against Mo Xiaoyao. Since he had received Mo Xiaoyao's promise, he naturally didn't want to stay here and be bullied. He stood up and glanced at Yi Li, then turned and walked out of the courtyard. Li, look at him, he can't even win against I in an argument. Don't you think that marrying me back then was the best arrangement you could have made? It's like a match made in heaven, right? Ignoring the fact that Mo Jingli hadn't walked out of the courtyard, Mo Xiaoyao crossed the chessboard and grabbed Yi Li's hand, feeling pleased with himself. Yi Li looked helplessly at Mo Jingli, who stumbled and walked faster after hearing a certain person's shameless boasting. Is it something to be proud of? Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said proudly, Of course, I have to let Li know that your husband is 100 times better than others in every aspect. Including arguing. Yi Li rubbed her head and thought for a bit. She looked sincerely at the man opposite her and said, If you want to argue, You shouldn't look for Mo Jingli. He has no fighting ability at all. Then who should I look for? Mo Xiaoyao squinted as he asked. She's old Master Wang's wife from Glass City's Nanyuan Street. Yi Li smiled. Mo Xiaoyao was confused. Who was that? Yi Li said with a smile, Madam Wang is known as Li City's fastest talker, the #1 shrew. It's said that she once scolded 3 grown men on the street until they cried. Why don't Prince give it a try when we go back? Mo Xiaoyao was stupefied. After a moment of silence, he raised his head and said with a raised eyebrow, Does she dare to argue with I? Yi Li was speechless. Indeed, no matter how powerful Madam Wang was, she would still be mute in front of Prince Ding. Seeing this, Prince Ding smiled proudly. Look at Li Li. Those who are more powerful than I can't argue with I. Those who are more powerful than I can't argue with I. Your husband is still the most powerful one. Yi Li covered her face and admitted defeat to a certain person's shamelessness. Of course, Mo Jingli was not the only one who knew about Prince Ding's return to the capital. It was just that he was one step faster as the regent and lived outside the palace. Less than 2 hours after Mo Jingli left, Prime Minister Liu also came to ask for an audience. Unfortunately, he was told that the prince had left with the princess and the Shizi. The Prince Ding mansion's ancestral tablets were all enshrined in the family temple outside the city, Wu Yu Nunnery. Although Mo Jingqi ordered people to seal the Prince Ding mansion, he did not dare to easily let people touch Wu Yu Nunnery and disturb the ancestral tablets of the Prince Ding. There were still people taking care of Wu Yu Nunnery. Some citizens of the capital would even go to the outer hall of Wu Yu Nunnery to burn incense. Therefore, even if the Prince Ding mansion did not have an owner, there was never a lack of incense in front of the ancestral tablets. Seeing that Prince Ding and his group came to pay their respects, the soldiers guarding here naturally did not dare to stop them and respectfully let them in. The two left the guards outside and brought Mo Xiaobao into the innermost inner hall. The ancestral hall in the inner hall enshrined the Prince Ding mansion's ancestral tablets. The tablet at the top was naturally the first-generation Prince Ding, Mo Lanyun. And at the bottom was Mo Xiaoyao's father and elder brother, Mo Liufang and Mo Xiuwen. Without needing the two to teach him, Mo Xiaobao respectfully went forward to burn incense and kowtow to the ancestors. After paying their respects to the ancestors, the family of 3 had just walked out of Wu Yu Nunnery when they encountered a large group of people. Standing beside Mo Xiaoyao, Yi Li raised her eyebrows and said, There are still people coming to pay their respects to the ancestors of the Prince Ding mansion at this time? Ever since the Prince Ding mansion and the Da Chu state broke off relations, other than the commoners, most of the nobles who came to pay their respects came and went quietly. It was rare to see such a grand scene. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said indifferently, They came from the palace. Block them and send them back. In the end, the order to stop them was naturally given to the imperial bodyguards. At this time, everyone was well aware of who could come out of the palace. If they were not sincere in paying their respects, the Prince Ding mansion would not need these incense sticks. After receiving the order, a few guards went forward and blocked the path of the large group of people before they reached the bottom of the stairs. These people were indeed from the palace. Naturally, they were all proud and arrogant. Seeing the 2 people who suddenly blocked the path, someone immediately went forward and asked sternly, Impudent. Do you know who is in the palanquin? How dare you block the way? The guards of the Prince Ding mansion were even more arrogant than them. They smiled coldly and said, We don't know who is in there. Dismount from the palanquin in front of Wu Yu Nunnery. Those who dare to carry the palanquin to the bottom of the stairs, the Prince Ding mansion does not need you to pay your respects. Please go back the way you came. How dare you? How dare you be so rude in front of the noble consort? Take them down. Wait. A cold female voice came out from the graceful and gorgeous palanquin. The curtain was lifted up. Noble consort Liu, dressed in white, walked out of the palanquin with the help of a palace maid. The eunuch who was flaunting his power outside quickly went forward and said with a flattering smile, Please forgive me, noble consort. These 2 unruly people have eyes but don't recognize Mount Tai. They are blocking your way. I will ask someone to take them down. Noble consort Liu frowned and said coldly, leave. The eunuch's flattery was ignored by the sound of horse hooves. He had no choice but to leave. Noble consort Liu strolled to the front of the two guards and asked, is Prince Ding here? The guards didn't answer. They only said, noble consort, please go back. Noble consort Liu frowned and said, I just want to pay my respects to the former kings of the Prince Ding mansion. The two guards were silent. Their refusal was obvious. They only needed to carry out the prince's order. They didn't need to know the reason why she came here. Noble consort Liu had been a noble since she was a child. She had been a noble consort for more than 10 years. She was used to being obeyed by others. Seeing the two guards being so stubborn, a trace of anger flashed across her face. But she still held it back and said, go and tell Prince Ding that I have something to discuss with him. The two guards looked at each other and said in a distant but polite tone, the prince and the princess have returned to the capital. The prince left a message. Since you don't really want to pay your respects, you don't need to disturb the peace of our ancestors. Noble consort Liu's face darkened. Her expressionless face covered the awkwardness of that moment. Originally, she didn't really want to pay her respects to the ancestors of the Prince Ding mansion. She just heard that Prince Ding had left the city. She guessed that he would bring his child to pay his respects to the ancestors. So she hurried over. She didn't expect that Mo Xiaoyao would send people to stop her here. Noble consort Liu felt embarrassed. Chapter 580. After a long while, noble consort Liu calms down. She frowns and says, in that case, I will go back to the city to see Prince Ding. Thank you. Please go back. The guard salutes her. Sitting back in the sedan, noble consort Liu's face is gloomy. Her face is so cold that it seems to freeze. She knows Mo Xiaoyao is inside, but he doesn't want to come out to see her. Thinking of this, there is a trace of resentment in her eyes. Does he hate me so much that he won't even come out to see me? Noble consort Liu's well-maintained fingers tightly hold the silk in her hand. Her eyes flash with determination. Mo Xiaoyao, you will become mine one day? Yi Li's mood is ruined by noble consort Liu's sudden appearance. She is not in the mood to play anymore. Of course, she knew that noble consort Liu had an ulterior motive for coming here to worship at this time with great fanfare. Now Yi Li is sure that the person she hates the most in her life is noble consort Liu. Even Mo Jingqi, Mo Jingli, Lei Zhenting and Su Zuidi are not as annoying as this woman. Su Zuidi is narcissistic, selfish and shameless at most. This noble consort Liu doesn't know what face is at all. Su Zuidi thinks that Mo Xiaoyao still loves her, so she confidently pesters him. This noble consort Liu knows that Mo Xiaoyao has no feelings for her, but she still believes that only she is worthy of Mo Xiaoyao. She and Mo Xiaoyao are a perfect match. She has to be strong enough to deal with perverts. Li, I am wronged. Looking at his beloved wife's gloomy face, Prince Ding has to complain carefully. In the past, he only thought that Li doesn't get jealous, which makes him very unhappy. He thought that Li doesn't love him enough. However, when Li's expression really turned ugly, he couldn't help but want to carefully apologize and make her happy. He wished that Li would never be jealous in this lifetime. Too much jealousy is not good for health. Yi Li looks back at him. Mo Xiaoyao quickly says, that woman came here herself. I've already told her a long time ago that I only have one wife, and that's Lily. Who knows why she doesn't understand human language? Yi Li smiled faintly. Isn't it because our Prince Ding's charm is outstanding? Mo Xiaoyao was pleasantly surprised. Li also thinks that this prince's charm is outstanding. Yi Li nodded and said seriously, of course. Su Zuidi, Princess Lingyun, noble consort Liu. Although there weren't many of them, they were still the top two beauties in Great Chu and Western Hill. Their quality was definitely excellent. Compared to the so-called handsome men, Prince Ding's charm is nothing, right? Mo Xiaoyao is suddenly depressed. Li is still angry. Li, husband understands. In the future, if anyone dares to look at husband, I will dig out their eyes. Yi Li raises her eyebrows, asking curiously, "Why not ruin your face? Isn't that the reason?" Mo Xiaoyao sternly refuses, "If husband's face is ruined again, wife won't be pleased to see me." Mo Xiaobao pokes his head out from his father's embrace, blinking his eyes, "Father, don't worry about ruining it. This child will definitely grow up to be an earth-shattering handsome man. Mother, just look at me." Mo Xiaoyao angrily shoves his son back into his embrace, "Don't use words like that. When you go back, write earth-shattering 500 times for me." Mo Xiaobao wiggles his little butt in his father's embrace, groaning, "Mother, father 75. Back in the city, after Prince Li's visit to the inn, the imperial consort in the palace rushed out of the capital. Now, everyone in the capital knew that Prince Ding and his wife had brought the little heir back. The moment they entered the city gates, they attracted countless gazes. But because of the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the imperial family, the commoners didn't dare to go up and say anything. But from their expressions, one could see the excitement in their eyes. Although the important figures in the imperial court were focused on fighting for power, there were still many commoners who remembered that there was a war going on a few hundred li away. Mo Xiaobao stood up from Mo Xiaoyao's embrace, curiously looking at the surrounding streets. It wasn't rare for people to gather around like this in Li City, so Mo Xiaobao didn't feel any stage fright. In fact, the more you look at this young master, the happier you'll be. Nestled in Mo Xiaoyao's embrace, he poked his head out and smiled brightly at the pedestrians, instantly causing them to fall over. "The little heir is so cute. As expected of Prince Ding and Princess Ding's child, he's so adorable. He's so brave at such a young age, no wonder he's the descendant of the Prince Ding mansion. The Prince Ding mansion has a successor." These praises naturally entered Mo Xiaobao's ears, so Mo Xiaobao became even more spirited. Yi Li walked beside Mo Xiaoyao, looking at her excited son. She raised her brows and said to Mo Xiaoyao, "Others said that Prince was flamboyant when he was young, but I didn't believe it. Now, I finally believe it." She pointed at Mo Xiaobao in amusement. "He's so flamboyant at such a young age, what will happen in a few years?" Mo Xiaobao pouted and defended himself. "Mother, this child is doing this for father's face. Didn't people say that a tiger father wouldn't beget a dog son? Father is so mighty, if son is like little Dai Lung, wouldn't it be father's face?" Mo Xiaoyao looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile and said, "I don't know when I's face is so important in your eyes." Mo Xiaobao laughed foolishly. Yi Li raised her hand and flicked his forehead, saying, "Little Junhan is much more obedient than you. Be careful, your Uncle Lung will punish you if he hears your words." Mo Xiaobao hid in his father's arms, touched his forehead that was flicked, and muttered, "I didn't say anything wrong, Uncle Lung won't dare to punish me. If he was soft and silly like little Dai Lung, he would be bullied to death by his father. Little Dai Lung should be glad that he became the child of Uncle Lung and not the child of the Prince Ding mansion." Touching his forehead and looking at the sky, Missouri Xiaobao deeply felt that his life was great. Yi Li looked strangely at her son who was looking at the sky, looking like a little old man, and asked curiously, "What are you thinking about?" Her son always liked to think about strange things. Sometimes it made his parents not know whether to laugh or cry. Mo Xiaoyao quietly pinched Mo Xiaobao's butt, smiled and said, "Are you hungry? Look at his big, soulless eyes. You didn't eat much for lunch." Mo Xiaobao angrily glared, "You're the one with big eyes. You're the rice bucket, you're the rice bucket." Mo Xiaoyao smiled, "You think I don't know that you're thinking about eyes bad words?" A family of 3, a tall and handsome white-haired man was holding a jade-like boy in black, and beside him was a beautiful woman wearing a light-colored cloak. They walked slowly along the street, talking as they walked, with a faint smile on their faces. This warm and quiet scene made many people stunned, and even 1 or 2 acquaintances who wanted to go up and say hello were a little embarrassed to disturb them. People quietly watched the two stroll, and the originally noisy street seemed to be quiet. In a tea house on the street, noble consort Liu stood quietly by the open window, wearing a white robe and a snowfox cloak. She looked down at the man and woman walking slowly from afar, and her tightly clenched hands were scratched by her fingernails. What a beautiful couple! And Prince Ding, When he grows up, he'll definitely be more handsome than Prince Ding. Behind noble consort Liu, Tanjiji said with a faint smile. Noble consort Liu suddenly turned around and coldly glanced at Tanjiji. Tanjiji didn't care, shrugged, and didn't say anything. Seeing that he didn't say anything, noble consort Liu turned around and looked at the white-haired man. Thinking about why his hair was white, noble consort Liu's heart was filled with resentment. At that time, if she had known that Yi Li could win Mo Shuyao's heart, she would never have let Yi Li stay by his side. Unfortunately, one wrong step led to many wrong steps. In order to win Mo Shuyao's heart, she even helped Yi Li. Thinking of this, noble consort Liu felt that she had done the stupidest thing in the world. Why? Why didn't he love her? In what way was she inferior to Yi Li? Noble consort Liu stared at the green-robed woman beside the white-haired man from afar. She was beautiful, but noble consort Liu thought she was much more beautiful than her. In terms of family background, she was the daughter of the Prime Minister. Yi Li had a maternal grandfather from the Shu family, but that was only a maternal grandfather after all. Strictly speaking, Yi Li was just the daughter of a commoner. Tanjiji looked at the woman in front of him with a smile. She was too obsessed with love. What's more, did noble consort Liu really love Mo Shouyao as much as she thought? She probably didn't want to accept the fact. Think about it, how could a beautiful and proud woman who could even make the emperor fall for her? How could she tolerate a man who didn't have her in his eyes? Send someone to invite Prince Ding and Princess Ding up for a talk. Noble consort Liu said coldly. Tanjiji frowned. Is that okay? It's not good news for noble consort Liu to leave the palace. Go. Tanjiji shrugged. If noble consort insists. Downstairs, Yi Li sensed a pair of resentful eyes staring at her from afar. She looked up and saw the figure of the woman in white standing by the window of the second floor not far away. Noble consort Liu deserved to be the most beautiful woman in the Chu capital after Su Zuidi. She was over 30 years old now, but she was still as beautiful as a snow pear flower. Standing there for a while, she had attracted the attention of many passers-by, but she didn't seem to care. She just looked at the passers-by in a daze. She was like a beautiful white jade sculpture. Greetings, Prince Ding. Greetings, Princess. Noble consort Liu wants to see you. A man who looked like a guard appeared on the street and said respectfully. Mo Shouyao had a dangerous look in his eyes. He lowered his eyes and said indifferently, Li Li must be thirsty. Let's go and have a cup of tea. Yi Li smiled faintly, okay. Chapter 581. Walking up to the second floor of the tea house, there was not a single guest there. This was not a very high-end tea house, and the furnishings inside were not to the liking of noble consort Liu, who had lived in the palace for a long time. Therefore, she chose this place purely to wait for Mo Shouyao and Qin Wanru. Noble consort Liu naturally could not stay in the same room with so many common people, so this tea house had been emptied long ago. The empty second floor was very quiet. As soon as he stepped on the stairs, he saw noble consort Liu standing facing the window, leaving only a white back. The palace maids and eunuchs around her all bowed their heads, and no one dared to make the slightest sound. Mo Shouyao raised his eyebrows, carried Xiaobao to an empty table on the side, and saw the little steamed bun put on the table. Xiaobao curled his small mouth. He was not a child, he did not want to sit on the table. He reached out his small hand, wanting Yi Li to hug him. Yi Li smiled faintly and reached out to take him to the chair on the side to sit down. Only then did Xiaobao happily sit on the big chair, twisting his small butt, and blinking his eyes at Yi Li, saying, Nyang Qin, didn't that auntie invite us to drink tea? Why did she ignore us? Auntie. Yi Li's mouth twitched. Don't think that Xiaobao did not know how to speak, he would offend people as soon as he opened his mouth. For someone who had just learned how to speak and knew how to call Qin Zheng sister, and first and second auntie, whether he wanted to make people happy or not depended on his mood. Yi Li sometimes worried that this son would grow up to be a dissolute playboy, so she agreed to Mo Shouyao's suggestion, which was rare, to prevent Xiaobao from interacting with Han Mingxi as much as possible. Therefore, this time, noble consort Liu must have done something to make Xiaobao unhappy. Noble consort Liu turned around and saw the black-clothed child sitting between Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao, and couldn't help but be surprised. Noble consort Liu flaunted her beauty. Although she did not like Mo Jingqi, she had to admit that Mo Jingqi was a handsome man. However, their children, 2 boys and 1 girl, were not as beautiful as this black-clothed boy in front of her. Noble consort Liu looked at the boy in black who was looking at her eagerly. Even the anger in her heart dissipated a lot. However, she felt even more indignant. Her and Prince Ding's child would definitely be prettier than this child. On the side, Yi Li looked at the sky speechlessly. Seeing noble consort Liu's absent-minded appearance, she knew that her mind was wandering again. Perhaps he had some unrealistic fantasies in his mind. Auntie. Pretty auntie. Mo Xiaobao believed that he was a person with a good sense of beauty, so even if he did not like the auntie in front of him, he had to admit that she was a very beautiful auntie. It was a pity that there was something wrong with this auntie's brain. Just a moment ago, she was still glaring at him angrily. He thought that she was going to get angry, but who knew that she was staring at him in a daze? Young master knows that he is handsome, but auntie is too old, so don't drool at young master. Young master Mo thought narcissistically. Auntie, do you want to treat us to tea or not? Mo Xiaobao asked impatiently. Noble consort Liu was called auntie again and again by a child. Even if she was slow, she knew that the child was doing it on purpose. Even if the child was immature, someone must have ordered him to do it. Noble consort Liu came forward and frowned. Little heir, I am not an auntie. Mo Xiaobao frowned and looked at her for a while. Then he said quietly, my father said that people who are 10 years older than my mother should be called auntie. Although his mother was in her 20s, many people said that his mother looked like a young girl who was not yet 20 years old. The auntie in front of him looked like she was in her 30s. She was as old as his father. It's okay if you don't take good care of yourself. I will introduce you to my mother's skincare products. Mo Xiaobao said with pity. Such a beautiful person became an auntie because she did not know how to take good care of herself. Therefore, Mo Xiaobao believed that noble consort Liu was an auntie. Cough, cough. Yi Li, who was drinking tea with her head lowered, accidentally choked. Mo Xiaoyao raised one eyebrow and looked at his serious son with a faint smile. Why didn't he remember that he had taught him that people who were 10 years older than Yi Li should be called auntie? Little heir is so smart. Noble consort Liu gritted her teeth and said coldly, Miss Yi taught me well. Yi Li's expression was normal. She said with a smile, Noble consort, you are overpraising me. Who praised you? Noble consort Liu felt hatred in her heart. She looked at Yi Li's smiling face and her heart couldn't help but twitch. She always thought that Yi Li was not as beautiful as she was. But now that she looked at Yi Li so closely, she found that Yi Li was not as ordinary as she remembered. Her eyebrows were delicate and graceful. Her smile was gentle, making people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. Under the gentleness between her eyebrows, there was a hint of elegance and nobility. These were 2 contradictory temperaments, but the woman in front of her had a confidence and majesty that she had never seen before. People couldn't help but remember that this woman was not only a daughter of a famous family, but also a heroine who could ride a horse and fight. This kind of temperament didn't need any external decoration or expression to hide. Even if she smiled so gently like an ordinary woman, people still didn't dare to offend her. Of course, this wasn't what noble consort Liu cared about the most. What made noble consort Liu gnash her teeth and hate was Yi Li's age. Yi Li was old compared to a 14 or 15-year-old girl who was of marriageable age. But compared to noble consort Liu, who was over 30 years old, Yi Li, who was 21 or 22 years old and looked like she was 18 years old, was so young that it made people hate her. No matter how much noble consort Liu didn't want to admit it, she had to admit that she was old compared to Yi Li. Thinking of this, noble consort Liu looked at Mo Xiaoyao, who was sitting on the side, with some panic. She saw that Mo Xiaoyao was holding a cup of tea in one hand, but he didn't drink it, nor did he look at her. Instead, he fixed his eyes on the woman in blue who was sitting on the other side. Looking at the shallow dimples on Yi Li's lips, the handsome face under the white hair also showed a happy smile. Sitting between such a handsome man and woman was a child who seemed to have all the advantages of the two. This picture was so beautiful that people were addicted, but noble consort Liu suddenly felt cold all over. Xiao. Prince Ding. After thinking for a moment, seeing that Mo Xiaoyao didn't want to speak, noble consort Liu had to speak. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and looked at her silently with a questioning look. Noble consort Liu gritted her teeth and said, "I have something to talk to Prince Ding alone. Can Miss Yi and the heir leave?" Before Yi Li could speak, Mo Xiaobao spoke first. No. No matter how angry noble consort Liu was, she couldn't get angry in front of Mo Xiaoyao. She could only force a stiff smile and said, "Little heir, I have something to talk to your father about. Why don't you let your mother take you out to play?" Mo Xiaobao puckered his little mouth and looked at Mo Xiaoyao with eager eyes. His big black and white eyes were instantly filled with tears, and it looked like they were about to drip out. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and looked at his son. "What do you want to do?" Mo Xiaobao looked at his father pitifully and choked with sobs. "Father, do you not want Xiaobao and mother anymore? Xiaobao loves mother and father the most. Father doesn't want Xiaobao anymore. Woo-woo." Thus, thanks to noble consort Liu, Mo Xiaoyao heard his son say that he loved him for the first time in his life. This kid usually wanted to kick his father as far away as possible. Of course, he also thought the same. Chapter 582. Father won't abandon your mother. Mo Xiaoyao promised. He'll only abandon you. Mo Xiaobao said with tears in his eyes, but just now, this auntie wanted mother to take Xiaobao away. Woo-woo. Little uncle said that all the women who want to talk to father alone want to be Xiaobao's stepmother. Xiaobao doesn't want a stepmother. Mo Xiaoyao was speechless. He felt that separating Han Mingxi from Mo Xiaobao and Mo Xiaobao was definitely a wrong decision. He should have separated the 5 brothers of the Shu family as well. Look at what Shu Wu taught his son. He also learned a lot from Shu Qingchen, always talking about eldest uncle this way and that. If it wasn't for the fact that Mo Xiaobao often pestered Li, he suspected that Mo Xiaobao would simply follow Shu Qingchen to the Shu family. Of course, he could throw Mo Xiaobao to the Shu family now, but it was different for him as a father to throw Mo Xiaobao over and for his son to run over by himself. Your little uncle is right, so father won't talk to other women alone. I only want to talk to Li alone, so you shouldn't pester Li so often. That way, father will still love you. Xiaobao knew that father isn't a heartless person who would abandon his wife. Mo Xiaobao said with relief. This time, Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li both had tears in their eyes. The husband and wife looked at each other. Who was the one who failed to educate their 5-year-old son to become like this? Mo Xiaobao didn't care that his actions had also shocked his parents. He flipped over the chair and climbed into Mo Xiaoyao's arms. His tear-stained face revealed a happy and sweet smile. He said to noble consort Liu, whose face had turned green from anger, "Auntie, men and women shouldn't touch each other. My father won't be intimate with you alone. A man's reputation is also very important. Auntie, don't harm my father." Yi Li helplessly raised her hand to rub her son's little head. She turned to noble consort Liu and said, "The child is not sensible. Please don't blame him." Mo Xiaobao smiled and rubbed his face against his mother's heart. Although he hated his father the most, his father was his mother's. If mother still wanted father, even though he hated it, he would still accept it magnanimously. Other women want to snatch him? Humph. Noble consort Liu's face was cold. She knew it was impossible to talk to Mo Xiaoyao alone today. He could only suppress the anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, "Since that's the case, there's no harm in Miss Yi listening to it." Yi Li smiled and nodded, indicating that she was all ears. Noble consort Liu waited until Mo Xiaoyao stopped sleeping in Mo Xiaobao's arms before she spoke. Although it was only a short confrontation, she was really a little scared of this little mischievous boy. He had an innocent and naive little face, But every word he said made her look bad. She couldn't even think that he didn't mean it on purpose. Prince Ding, what do you think about the current situation in the capital? Noble consort Liu stared at Mo Xiaoyao and asked in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and said, I only came back to worship my ancestors. I don't plan to get involved in the affairs of the capital. Moreover, the Mohist army has no connection with the Dhu state. I don't have a good reason to get involved. Noble consort Liu doesn't need to ask about this. Moreover, this isn't something noble consort Liu should ask about. Shouldn't ask. These 3 words were undoubtedly a huge blow to noble consort Liu, because it meant that Mo Xiaoyao still regarded her as an ordinary harem woman. No matter how talented Mo Xiaoyao was, he was still a marquis in the ancient imperial era. He definitely didn't think that men and women were equal. But he was different from ordinary men. He believed that some women were as capable as men. Therefore, he could accept them learning literature, martial arts, politics, and generals. For example, Yi Li and Princess Anshi. But at the same time, he still thought that most women were ordinary women in the boudoir. All they needed to do was to stay in the boudoir. The former represented equal status and respect to him, while the latter represented a man's vassal. Therefore, in Mo Xiaoyao's eyes, it was natural for Yi Li to get involved in anything, and noble consort Liu shouldn't get involved in the affairs of the imperial court. Not because she was a harem concubine, but because she wasn't qualified. Noble consort Liu obviously understood Mo Xiaoyao's thoughts. Because of this, she was even angrier. After a while, noble consort Liu gritted her teeth and said, Prince, you should know that my son has been made the crown prince. Once the emperor passes away, he will become the emperor of the Dhu state, and I will be the empress dowager of the Dhu state. Mo Xiaoyao nodded. Of course he knew. But so what? There are plenty of empress dowagers. In the Dhu state alone, there were 7 or 8 empress dowagers. So what? So what? The Dhu state had never had an empress dowager who could control the young emperor and stir up trouble in the previous dynasty. It wasn't that they didn't want to. Most women who worked hard all their lives to sit on the empress dowager's throne wanted to govern from behind the curtain. But the Dhu state had the Prince Ding mansion. As long as the Prince Ding mansion was there was no woman in the imperial court who could give orders. Therefore, since the founding of the Dhu state, the empress dowager with the most power was the current empress dowager, Mo Jingqi's birth mother. Even so, she wasn't able to reach the level of power in the imperial harem of previous dynasties. One reason was because Mo Jingqi wasn't young when he ascended the throne, and Mo Jingqi couldn't tolerate the loss of power. 2 was because the officials of the Dhu state weren't used to having power in the imperial harem. Noble consort Liu lowered her eyes. She couldn't argue with Mo Xiaoyao. Not only because she loved him, but also because she didn't have any bargaining chips to compete with him. She could only change her tone and say, Prince Ding should know the current situation in the imperial court. Not only did Mo Jingli poison the emperor, but he also forced the emperor to make him the prince regent. Once the emperor passes away, as the prince regent, Mo Jingli will definitely rule the world. At that time, the Dhu state will become Mo Jingli's world. In this way, it won't be good for Prince Ding, right? Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and looked at noble consort Liu without saying anything. Noble consort Liu continued, Prince Ding should know that Prince Li and you have been at odds since you were young. Because of Miss Yi, you have a grudge against him for stealing your wife. Once Prince Li has power in his hands, he will use the power of the entire country to make things difficult for the Northwest. Prince Ding will have a headache. Mo Xiaoyao casually picked up the teacup and took a sip. The bitter taste of the not-so-good tea leaves made him frown. He said calmly, Noble consort Liu, I'm afraid you haven't discussed this with Prime Minister Liu before? The smile on noble consort Liu's face froze. She asked with some confusion, what does Prince Ding mean? Mo Xiaoyao said, I said that if noble consort Liu has nothing to do, you should stay in the imperial palace and not interfere with things you don't understand. If you had discussed it with Prime Minister Liu beforehand, He would have told you that no matter if it was your son or Mo Jingli who ascended the throne, they wouldn't be able to do anything. They don't have the ability to make things difficult for I. Noble consort Liu's expression changed slightly. She clenched her fingers tightly and said, Prince Ding is too confident. She didn't believe it. The Northwest was only a small place. In noble consort Liu's eyes, the people of the Da Chu state could drown that small place with just a mouthful of saliva. But she forgot how many people of the Da Chu state were willing to spit on the Prince Ding mansion for her. However, what you said is not wrong. For I, the little crown prince ascending the throne is more beneficial than Mo Jingli ascending the throne. Mo Xiaoyao looked down at the tea in his hand and said lightly. Hearing this, noble consort Liu was delighted. She said with a smile, so, Prince Ding agrees to help I? Mo Xiaoyao looked up and glanced at Yi Li who was drinking tea silently. He asked, Li, did I agree? Yi Li looked up and said lightly, I didn't hear it. What does Prince Ding mean? Noble consort Liu felt like she was being played. Even if the person playing with her was Mo Xiaoyao, she still couldn't stand it. But in fact, Mo Xiaoyao didn't mean to play with her. He looked at her calmly and said, I already promised Mo Jingli that I wouldn't interfere with the affairs of the imperial court. Why? Noble consort Liu asked. At the same time, she was deeply disappointed. She hoped to cooperate with Mo Xiaoyao. At least, she had to let Mo Xiaoyao see how different she was. Mo Xiaoyao would definitely realize that she was a better choice than Yi Li. Why? Do you really not care about what you can get by cooperating with me? As long as you help me, the Prince Ding mansion will still be the Prince Ding mansion of the Da Chu state. You can become the next Prince Regent. You can even. She would even help him if he wanted to become the emperor. Compared to the Empress Dowager, she wanted to be his empress more. Yi Li's eyes twitched. She said lightly, I don't know what I can get by cooperating with noble consort Liu, but, at least I can anger Mo Jingqi to death. Prince, right? His favorite concubine, the birth mother of the crown prince, was cooperating with his most hated enemy, the enemy he feared the most. Even if Mo Jingqi didn't die of illness or poison, he would be angered to death, right? Miss Yi. I was talking to Prince Ding. Noble consort Liu said coldly. She stared at Yi Li angrily. Yi Li's expression was calm and unhurried as she replied, this consort is also talking to His Highness. I was just giving my opinion on noble consort Liu's proposal for Prince to consider. Prince, right? Mo Xiaoyao smiled dotingly. He said softly, Miss Li is very thoughtful. I's business is Li's business. There's nothing that can't be said. Besides, I can still anger Mo Jingqi to death even if I don't cooperate with the Liu family. Miss Li, you have to believe in your husband's ability. Is Prince refusing? Noble consort Liu said to Mo Xiaoyao. She stared fiercely at Yi Li. Mo Xiaoyao said carelessly, I'm not refusing. I have never considered such a boring and time-wasting proposal. Chapter 583. Noble consort Liu's face turned green and white. She originally came with full confidence, but now she didn't have any confidence left. But she couldn't accept it. She couldn't understand why Mo Xiaoyao rejected her. If it was anyone else in this world, they would definitely agree to her proposal without hesitation. Why would Mo Xiaoyao reject her? However, she had forgotten that no one in this world was Mo Xiaoyao. And she didn't fall in love with anyone in this world. You rejected me because of her. Noble consort Liu stood up and pointed at Yi Li. Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, with or without Li, I wouldn't agree to such a brainless proposal. I don't believe it. Noble consort Liu shouted. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and saw that Mo Xiaobao had already fallen asleep. He moved closer to his chest so that noble consort Liu's voice wouldn't wake him up. He turned to Yi Li and smiled, Li, can you help your husband tell her why this proposal is brainless? Yi Li pursed her lips and smiled faintly. She looked at noble consort Liu and said lightly, Noble consort Liu, do you know who Mo Jingqi is to our Ding Palace? Or, What is the relationship between the Da Chu state's royal family and the Prince Ding mansion? Noble consort Liu was stunned, but she quickly understood Yi Li's meaning. At the same time, her face turned pale. 200 years ago, the founder of the Da Chu state and Prince Ding were brothers from the same father and mother. In these 200 years, the Da Chu state's royal family and the Prince Ding mansion had the same bloodline. They were wise and virtuous ministers. But now, Mo Jingqi and Mo Xiuyao had a blood feud. The Da Chu state's royal family owed the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers from the Mohist army. No one knew how much blood ties there were between the imperial family and the Prince Ding mansion, but it was certain that the hatred between the Prince Ding mansion and the imperial family of the Da Chu state was as deep as the ocean. In fact, with Mo Xiuyao's temper, it was already strange that he didn't lead his army straight to Beijing when he first received the news. And her son had the bloodline of Da Chu state's imperial family. She was Mo Jingqi's concubine. Looking at her pale face, Yi Li smiled and said, "Noble consort Liu, do you understand now?" It was impossible for the Prince Ding mansion to work with either noble consort Liu or Prince Li. Because that's meaningless. Although there was no such thing as an eternal friend, why should one force oneself to be friends when one clearly knew that they were enemies? Compared to helping one enemy defeat another, they obviously preferred to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight, waiting until both sides were injured before going out to clean up the mess. Or did noble consort Liu think that because the Prince Ding mansion didn't do anything these years, they had forgotten the hatred of the past? The hatred between Mo Jingqi and the Prince Ding mansion has nothing to do with I standing by the table. Noble consort Liu forced herself to be calm and said. Yi Li smiled but didn't say anything. Family members weren't to blame. This sentence didn't work in this era. People who were implicated by family members could be found everywhere. Moreover, even if they were really innocent, the Prince Ding mansion would never support a direct bloodline of Mo Jingqi. Looking at noble consort Liu, Yi Li said softly, "Since we've finished talking, please go back, noble consort Liu. We won't participate in any court matters during these days in Beijing. Noble consort Liu, please don't disturb us anymore." Noble consort Liu shook her head and stared blankly at Mo Xiuyao, asking, "Why?" Mo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows. Obviously, he didn't understand what noble consort Liu meant. Noble consort Liu bit the corner of her lips and said, "Why can't you see me? As long as you want it, no matter what it is, I can bring it to you. Compared to Yi Li, what's wrong with me? Will she love you more than I do? Will she die for you? I can do anything for you. Just because my surname is Liu, you don't care about me." The more she spoke, the more agitated she became. It was as if she wanted to vent all the years of suppression. In the end, noble consort Liu was almost screaming. Mo Xiuyao frowned and raised his hand to cover Xiaobao's ears. But Xiaobao was still awakened by this sudden shrill voice. In Mo Xiuyao's arms, he raised his hand to rub his eyes in a daze and looked blankly at the white-clothed woman in front of him with a twisted expression. "Why are you doing this to me? Xiuyao, I'm the one who loves you the most. I'm the one who met you first. I met you before Su Zuidi and Yi Li. Why won't you look at me?" Noble consort Liu said hysterically. Yi Li brought the teacup to her lips, but put it down after thinking for a while. This kind of fierce confession of love was absolutely popular even in her previous life. She really didn't expect that noble consort Liu, who was as cold as snow on the outside, was so fierce in her heart. Unfortunately, she couldn't appreciate this kind of fierceness. Not only could she not appreciate it, but she was also very angry. What was going on in this world? It was fine that all men liked scum. It was not easy for her to find a good man who was not a scum, but the heavens couldn't tolerate it. She put the teacup back on the table with a bang. The clear and heavy sound made everyone present stunned. Yi Li looked at noble consort Liu indifferently and said, "Noble consort Liu, even if you want to confess your love, you should at least respect me, the first wife, right? Saying these words in front of me, do you really think that I, Yi Li, am made of wood?" Since she had already said it, noble consort Liu naturally threw caution to the wind. Why would she care whether Yi Li was angry or not? Besides, she had never been afraid of Yi Li being angry. She looked at Yi Li and sneered, "I am talking to Xiaoyao, what does it have to do with you? Do you really think that because you are Princess Ding, I will give in to you?" Yi Li lowered her eyes and calmly looked at her fingers, but her eyes began to contain a storm. She had always thought that quarreling with a woman for a man was a very degrading thing, but some women could be described with one word: cheap. This consort doesn't need you to give in. This consort just wants to warn you, you can be cheap, but don't be cheap to this consort's man. You can't afford my family's prince's reputation, Yi Li said coldly. Impudent. You dare to scold I? Noble consort Liu flew into a rage. Since childhood, no one had ever dared to call her cheap. Yi Li raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "Could it be that you still think you are noble? Men like to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. If you stick to him, this consort will consider you 2 birds of a feather. If a man doesn't like you and you stick to him, that's called degrading yourself. Do you know why our prince doesn't like you?" Before noble consort Liu could speak, Mo Xiaoyao reminded her in a low voice, "Li, I don't stink. I smell as good as Li." Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's words, noble consort Liu's face became even uglier, but there was a trace of doubt in her eyes when she looked at Yi Li. Although she knew that Yi Li would never say anything nice, she really couldn't understand why Mo Xiaoyao didn't like her. Even if she couldn't compare to Yi Li, at least she wasn't worse than Su Zuidi. Why did she lose to that woman? Yi Li smiled coldly and slowly spat out a few words, "Because you cheap. If you had continued to pretend to be noble and indifferent, our prince might have taken a second look at you. In addition, not only are you cheap, you're already a wife and a mother, but you still shamelessly chase after another woman's man to express your love. You even have to add a word, slut." After saying this, Yi Li let out a long sigh. She had never scolded anyone with such vicious words in her life. Even Yi Ying and Su Zuidi hadn't made her this angry. After saying this, Yi Li lowered her eyes and didn't say anything else. Chapter 584. A cup of tea was placed in front of her. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her with a faint smile in his eyes. "Li, are you tired? Drink some tea." Yi Li stared blankly, then couldn't help but smile. Actually, she didn't like to lose her composure in front of Mo Xiaoyao, but since it was already like this, then so be it. After taking a sip of the tea, Yi Li put down the cup and reached out her hands to Mo Xiaobao. Mo Xiaobao happily threw himself into his mother's arms, smiling with curved eyes, and said in a low voice, "Mother is mighty." Yi Li gently patted his little head and said, "You're not allowed to learn. Children liked to imitate adults the most." If Mo Xiaobao also talked dirty one day, she would regret it for the rest of her life. "You." Noble consort Liu was already trembling with anger. She pointed at Mo Xiaoyao and said in a trembling voice, You're just going to let her insult me like this?" Mo Xiaoyao looked up and said doubtfully, "Why would I's beloved consort insult you? She was just giving you pointers. Didn't you say you were willing to do anything for I? I only want you to do one thing for me." Noble consort Liu looked at Mo Xiaoyao in a panic. She felt uneasy and couldn't help but shake her head. Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "Don't appear in front of I ever again." Yi Li looked at noble consort Liu's disbelieving face and said with a smile, "Noble consort Liu, you said you were willing to do anything for Mo Xiaoyao. Then, do you dare to go out on the street and tell everyone that the person you love is Prince Ding?" Noble consort Liu hadn't recovered from Mo Xiaoyao's ruthless words and was stunned by Yi Li's words. She reflexively looked at Mo Xiaoyao. If Mo Xiaoyao was willing to accept her, then of course she would dare to say it. But if Mo Xiaoyao didn't accept her at all, then after she said those words, even if she was the crown prince's birth mother, she would have nothing left. Seeing her expression, Yi Li understood. She sneered, "It seems that noble concubine Liu doesn't love him as much as she claims." Noble consort Liu didn't know what to say. After a long while, she looked at Mo Xiaoyao with even more resentment in her eyes. "You will regret it." Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows, his expression indifferent. Noble consort Liu looked at the family of 3 in front of her. There was no place for her in this place. Finally, She forced herself to turn around and go downstairs. Noble consort Liu asked all the maids and eunuchs to retreat to the first floor because she wanted to talk. At this time, noble consort Liu came down the stairs in a daze. When she reached the last step, her legs gave way and she fell down the stairs. The palace maids and eunuchs were so scared that they all rushed up to support her. The people downstairs immediately huddled together. Although noble consort Liu wasn't hurt, she recovered from the fall. "Your Highness, are you all right?" Noble consort Liu looked back at the empty stairs. She gritted her teeth and said, "Let's go back to the palace." Upstairs, Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li's cold face with a smile. He was in a good mood and said, "Is Miss Li angry?" Yi Li glanced at him indifferently and said, "Prince is happy." Mo Xiaoyao raised his hand and knocked on his forehead. He said with a smile, "Not bad. I never knew that Miss Li could be so sharp-tongued." Yi Li narrowed her eyes and asked, "Do you feel sorry for her?" "Why? She is so vicious." "There is no such thing as the most vicious, only more vicious. Next time you see her, Miss Li, scold her as much as you can. Scold her in front of everyone. Then she won't dare to covet your husband." Mo Xiaoyao quickly expressed his intention. Yi Li looked at him with a faint smile. "Covet? Isn't it Prince himself who attracts bees and butterflies?" Mo Xiaoyao said with a bitter face, "I don't dare to have a fierce wife at home." "Fierce wife, my mistake. I have a virtuous wife at home. I don't want to." Mo Xiaoyao said righteously. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao's playful appearance, Yi Li smiled helplessly and said, "Thank you for your praise, Prince." Mo Xiaobao came out from his mother's arms. He pointed at Mo Xiaoyao and said, "Mother, father lied to you. He is the one who attracts bees and butterflies. Last time he even said that all the women in the world would fall under his charm." Yi Li raised her eyebrows and looked at Mo Xiaoyao with a smile. Mo Xiaoyao really wanted to pull out the little brat in her arms and throw him down the stairs. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. Mo Xiaoyao pulled Mo Xiaobao into his arms and used both hands to pinch his little chubby face. "Stinky brat. What good does it do you to ruin your parents' relationship? You don't want a stepmother. Do you think your stepfather will treat you well? This father has enemies all over the world. Any man that is passable will want to pinch you to death. Do you know that?" Mo Xiaobao's eyes were filled with tears from being bullied. Yi Li covered her face and angrily glared at Mo Xiaoyao. "What kind of nonsense are you saying to Xiaobao?" Mo Xiaoyao stared at the tearful Mo Xiaobao and sneered, "I was telling him that other than his biological parents, his life would be over if he followed anyone. He's willing to cause trouble all day long. Mother, woo-woo, your child was wrong, save me ah." Unable to resist Mo Xiaoyao, Mo Xiaobao could only ask Yi Li for help. Yi Li smiled and took Mo Xiaobao from Mo Xiaoyao's arms. Lightly patting him, she said, "Let's see if you still dare to speak nonsense in the future." Woo-woo. He didn't dare. Mo Xiaobao quickly buried himself in Yi Li's arms, afraid that his father would find a chance to rub him again. In the empty second floor, although Mo Xiaobao's squeaking sounds could still be heard, it was exceptionally warm and peaceful. Outside the back door of the tea house, noble consort Liu's face was gloomy as she got into the luxurious sedan that was waiting for her. She coldly said, "Go to the Prime Minister's residence." Inside the sedan, Tan Jiji was lying comfortably on the wide soft couch, tasting the fresh fruits on the small table. Seeing noble consort Liu come in, he smiled. "The imperial family is indeed a good place. You can even taste such delicious fresh fruits on this early February day." Noble consort Liu coldly waved her hand and all the fruits on the small table fell to the ground. One of them even rolled out of the sedan door. But the people outside didn't dare to ask or stay, as if nothing had happened. Tan Jiji faintly glanced at her and said, "Mo Xiaoyao rejected you." Noble consort Liu's face was cold and she didn't speak. Of course she wouldn't tell Tan Jiji about the humiliation she suffered upstairs. But who was Tan Jiji? He had been Mo Jingqi's confidant for 10 years and Mo Jingqi had never doubted him. He could even make the saintess of Nanjiang listen to him without batting an eyelid. Not to mention how good he was at scheming, At least not many people in the world could compare with him when it came to figuring out people's minds and judging people's facial expressions. Just by looking at noble consort Liu's facial expression, Tan Jiji knew that it wasn't as simple as Mo Xiaoyao rejecting her. And Princess Ding herself wasn't easy to deal with. Just by thinking about what noble consort Liu would do, Tan Jiji could roughly guess what had happened. She was bullied by Princess Ding. Or more seriously, she was mocked by Princess Ding. Prince Ding is still helping her. The truth was far more serious than he thought. Yi Li directly scolded. "Shut up." Noble consort Liu said angrily. As long as she thought of the humiliation she suffered in the tea house, noble consort Liu wished she could tear Yi Li into pieces. But she couldn't kill Yi Li, at least she couldn't kill her now. So she could only endure it and force herself to forget about it for the time being. Tan Jiji shrugged. As she wished, he didn't mention it again. He asked, "If Mo Xiaoyao doesn't plan to help, what does noble consort Liu plan to do?" Noble consort Liu snorted and said, "I's son is the rightful crown prince. Even if Mo Xiaoyao doesn't help, so what? As long as my son sits on the throne. At that time, he would definitely pay back the humiliation he suffered today 100-fold. Tan Jiji raised his eyebrows and said, "So what? Isn't the current emperor of Shilling the rightful emperor? So what? How can I's son be the same as the emperor of Shilling? I have the Liu clan behind me." Noble consort Liu said. Tan Jiji curled his lips. That was even more unlucky. Even if Prince Li was overthrown, there was still the Liu clan to restrain the new emperor. Noble consort Liu, don't forget that the south is Prince Li's territory. And Prince Li is the regent who has the real military power. Honestly speaking, 1. Compared to Prince Li, the previous Prince Regent Mo Liufang was nothing. No matter how powerful he is, he doesn't want to usurp the throne. However, Prince Li and Prince Cheng were indeed eyeing the throne covetously. Noble consort Liu, are you confident that Prince Li won't force you to abdicate the throne in the future? Noble consort Liu frowned and said, "No, the emperor must have something on him." "Why do you think so?" Noble consort Liu sneered and said, "Who do you think Mo Jingli is? How can the position of regent be enough to get rid of him? He clearly had the victory in his hands, but in the end, he was made regent by the emperor. Instead, I's son became the crown prince. So the emperor must have something on him that is fatal. He had no choice but to take a step back, which led to today's situation. If I can find out what it is." Noble consort Liu, you haven't seen the emperor for many days, right? Tan Jiji asked. Noble consort Liu frowned and said, "He didn't ask I to see him. What's there to see him lying on the bed?" Tan Jiji shook his head in his mind. Mo Jingqi must have been extremely unlucky and blind to have married this woman. Mo Xiaoyao didn't like her, which was definitely a wise decision. Noble consort Liu, you'd better go back and see the emperor. I'm afraid, the emperor doesn't trust noble consort Liu and the Liu family anymore. At that time, don't let the snipe and the clam fight and let the fisherman profit. Mo Jingqi had always been a suspicious person. Lying on the bed, he became even more suspicious. Noble consort Liu's attitude might have been cold and arrogant in the past, but now in Mo Jingqi's eyes, it might be that she hoped he would die early. By the way, see if you can find out what Mo Jingqi has on Prince Li. Noble consort Liu thought for a while and nodded, saying, "I know." Chapter 585. What noble consort Liu had suffered in the tea house was naturally unknown to the common people outside. But it didn't prevent some special people from knowing. For example, Mo Jingli. As soon as noble consort Liu left the tea house, her embarrassed look when she went downstairs had already spread to the original Prince Li's mansion and now the Prince Regent's mansion. Speaking of which, although Mo Jingli wasn't very likable, he was obviously much better at dealing with people than Mo Jingqi. For so many years, the prince of the imperial family had been severely suppressed by Mo Jingqi, so they were indifferent to the emperor. Even though everyone knew that Mo Jingqi's illness must have something to do with Mo Jingli, no one said a word for him. On the contrary, After Mo Jingli became the Prince Regent, he treated these cousins more courteously. Now the relationship between the imperial family and Mo Jingli was much better. When the news reached the Prince Li's mansion, Prince Yu happened to be drinking tea at the Prince Regent's mansion. Mo Jingli didn't hide it. After reading it, he handed the letter to Mo Jingyu. Mo Jingyu was naturally happy for Mo Jingli's trust. After reading it, he frowned and slapped the letter on the table, saying, "What does this noble consort Liu and the Liu family want to do?" A concubine in the palace actually ran out of the capital to pay respects to the ancestors of the Prince Ding mansion. Who does she think she is? She even dares to stop Prince Ding and Princess Ding on the street and invite them to drink tea. Does the imperial family still want their face? Mo Jingli said coldly, "It's not like you, and I don't know noble consort Liu. Other than her feelings for Mo Xiaoyao, what else could she have?" Mo Xiaoyao clearly remembered. Back then, noble consort Liu's infatuation with Mo Xiaoyao had made all the princes and young masters in the capital endlessly envious. Unfortunately, Mo Xiaoyao, as the person involved, acted as if nothing had happened. Naturally, no one dared to mention it in front of him. An unmarried daughter's admiration for a man, although it was somewhat detrimental to her reputation, but if it was indeed a perfect match, it could be considered a good story. However, if a married woman in her 30s was still pestering a man, then she was shameless and had an affair. Is her brain damaged? With a wife like Princess Ding, how blind must Prince Ding be to fall in love with her? Although they weren't familiar with each other, Mo Jingyu still had a good impression of Yi Li, this Princess Ding. After all, it was rare to find a woman like Princess Ding in every dynasty, let alone the whole world. Just based on the fact that Prince Ding's legs were crippled and he was caught in the whirlpool of power in the capital, Princess Ding still did not abandon him. This was enough to make him endlessly admire her. After saying this, Mo Jingyu realized that it wasn't much. He looked apologetically at Mo Jingli. This person was also the one who had been blind back then. Otherwise, a woman like Princess Ding wouldn't have fallen into Prince Ding's hands, but rather the current princess consort Li. Mo Jingli shook his head, indicating that he didn't care. His cold eyes lowered slightly, hiding the ripples in them. After so many years, Mo Jingli was no longer the young boy who wanted to break off the engagement without thinking things through. After so long, he had thought things through. Back then, he was anxious to break off the engagement. Half of it was because of himself, but the other half was because of his imperial brother's silent instigation. Mo Jingqi thought that he was also the first son of the previous emperor, so the Shu family might help him, but not Mo Xiaoyao. He didn't think that he would force the Shu family to help Mo Xiaoyao. If it wasn't for him, he thought of the green-clothed woman he saw in the back courtyard of the inn. Mo Jingli's heart twitched. His resentment towards Mo Jingqi increased. That demure, graceful, and natural woman was originally his wife. Noble consort Liu wants to rope in Prince Ding to cooperate with her. If Prince Ding really agrees, it will be very disadvantageous for Prince Li. No matter what, there was no one in the Chu state who didn't fear Mo Xiaoyao. Even if he no longer had anything to do with the Chu state, this was the irreplaceable prestige of the Prince Ding mansion's 100 years of achievements. No. Mo Jingli refuted, Mo Xiaoyao won't cooperate with her. Mo Jingyu thought for a moment, then smiled and said, that's true. If Prince Ding agrees, noble consort Liu wouldn't have left in such a dispirited state. Mo Jingli smiled and said, Mo Xiaoyao is proud by nature. He definitely won't cooperate with his enemy. Even if noble consort Liu didn't have anything to do with what happened that year. His son is Mo Jingqi's son. Princess Ding looks gentle and refined, but her pride doesn't lose to Mo Xiaoyao's. If noble consort Liu wants to cooperate, I can guess what she will ask for. Yi Li definitely won't agree. Seeing Mo Jingli speak so confidently, Mo Jingyu couldn't help but sigh in her heart. To be able to understand Princess Ding so well, to be able to say such words in such a tone, Prince Li must have regretted it long ago. Unfortunately, there were many things in this world that had been missed. No matter how much regret it was useless. Thinking for a moment, Mo Jingyu couldn't help but remind him, Prince Li, now is not the time to provoke Prince Ding. With the matter of Mo Jingli rejecting the previous emperor's betrothal for Yi Ying, Mo Jingyu couldn't help but worry that Mo Jingli would do something irreparable for Princess Ding that would anger Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Jingli was startled, then smiled calmly. I only know what to do. Prince Yu doesn't need to worry. Now is indeed not the time to provoke Mo Xiaoyao. In the days they are in the capital, just treat them with courtesy. No one from the regent's residence should find trouble with him. Mo Xiaoyao nodded in agreement. His residence always had its tail between its legs. Naturally, it was even more impossible for him to provoke Mo Xiaoyao. However, just because we don't provoke him doesn't mean that others won't. Mo Jingli sneered. Mo Jingyu was startled. Mo Jingli said in a low voice, leak the news to Mo Jingqi. Tell him, the person he fears the most, Mo Xiaoyao, has returned to the capital. Mo Jingli was silent. He quietly looked at Mo Jingqi. Are you trying to scare Mo Jingqi to death? Mo Jingli didn't care about Mo Jingyu's gaze. He coldly said, that woman of noble consort Liu only has eyes for Mo Xiaoyao. There's nothing to fear. Have someone keep an eye on that old man of the Liu family. I heard that Prince De has been in cahoots with them these days. Mo Jingyu nodded and sighed helplessly. Uncle De is old. His eyesight is blurry. However, noble consort Liu's son is the crown prince. It's understandable that Uncle De is close to them. Mo Jingli sneered, idiot. Do you think noble consort Liu will let her son be the emperor? Do you think that old man of the Liu family will really abide by the law and be a virtuous minister? Mo Jingyu frowned and said, the crown prince is noble consort Liu's son. It shouldn't be that bad. Mo Jingli looked at him and said, you haven't been close to the palace these years. Why don't you enter the palace and find someone to inquire about noble consort Liu's relationship with the crown prince and the other two princes and princesses? When she becomes the Empress Dowager. Mo Jingyu said in a low voice, what else does she want after becoming the Empress Dowager? As a woman, being the Empress Dowager was the most honorable status in the world. What else could noble consort Liu do? Chapter 586. Mo Jingli said, I'm afraid that in noble consort Liu's eyes, 10 Empress Dowager positions are not worth as much as one Princess Ding. What? Mo Jingyu was stunned, then suddenly reacted. He couldn't help but throw the teacup in his hand to the ground. Slut. Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows and smiled. Wasn't that right? Inside the imperial palace, the magnificent bedchamber was deathly silent, and it was suffused with a faint aura of decadence and decay. Mo Jingqi lay on the bed, unable to move. His originally handsome face had aged and haggard by more than 10 years. The man in his 30s looked like a patient nearing the end of his life. He didn't know what kind of poison Mo Jingli had given him, but he knew it wasn't the 5 minerals powder. The 5 minerals powder didn't have such a strong toxicity. Ever since he stopped taking the medicine, he had been enduring a bone-piercing pain every day. And this pain didn't lessen even after he stopped taking the medicine. Instead, it caused his body to deteriorate even more. Even now, as long as he moved, he would feel pain all over his internal organs. Mo Jingqi knew that he didn't have long to live. But he couldn't accept it. He really couldn't accept it. He had planned and schemed all his life. He had never had a day of comfort. Today, Mo Xiaoyao occupied the northwest. Although Mo Jingli didn't say it explicitly, he also occupied the southeast. The northern barbarian army was knocking on the pass, and the northern tribes of Shilling were eyeing him. With so many things, Mo Jingqi couldn't let them go. He didn't know what the Da Chu state would become after he died. He didn't dare to kill the ancestors of the Da Chu state. Someone. Mo Jingqi called out hoarsely. The sleeping chamber was silent, and no one responded for a long time. Mo Jingqi was stunned for a while. Then he suddenly laughed, but his face was covered in tears. Ever since he was poisoned, he realized that he was such a failure. No one from the royal family spoke up for him. The ministers of the imperial court were busy fighting for sides. His mother stopped coming after visiting him 2 or 3 times. Even the eunuchs and palace maids who used to be important to her were nowhere to be found. For the past few days, he had been facing the empty sleeping chamber alone. It was as if he was watching his internal organs slowly rot and die. Men. Someone. I want to drink water. Mo Jingqi called out hoarsely. A teacup with a dragon and phoenix pattern was handed to him. Mo Jingli was dressed in a black robe, holding the teacup in one hand as he stood in front of the bed. She bent down to help Mo Jingqi up and brought the cup of water to his lips. Mo Jingqi was indeed very thirsty. He couldn't care less and lowered his head to drink more than half of the cup of water before he gasped for breath. After putting her down again, Mo Jingli turned around and put the teacup back on the table before slowly walking back. What are you doing here? Mo Jingqi said coldly. Mo Jingli sat down and calmly said, I came to tell royal brother a piece of good news. Someone who can deal with me has come to the capital. Does royal brother think this is good news for you? Who is it? Mo Jingqi had no interest in listening to him. At this time, Mo Jingqi really couldn't think of anyone who could deal with the powerful Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli smiled mockingly at him. Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao has come back. Royal brother, are you happy? Mo Xiaoyao. Why did he come back? Why didn't you give the order to arrest him? Mo Jingqi was shocked and shouted angrily. But right after he shouted, he was followed by an earth-shattering coughing sound. Seeing Mo Jingqi lying on the bed with a pale face in pain, Mo Jingli's eyes flashed with pity. He said indifferently, arrest him? Royal brother, do you think I'm crazy? Dachu state is surrounded by enemies. The north is already overwhelming. Once we start fighting with the Mohist army, Shi Ling and the northern tribes will definitely take advantage of the situation. What should we do then? Mo Xiaoyao is also our enemy. Mo Jingqi said hatefully. Right now, Mo Xiaoyao is only your enemy. Mo Jingli said lightly. He looked down at him. Mo Xiaowen was killed by you. The thousands of Mohist army that died at the border were also killed by you. Mo Xiaoyao's serious injuries were also caused by you. When Princess Ding was surrounded and killed in the capital, it was also ordered by you. Royal brother, if Mo Xiaoyao didn't look for you, who would he look for? He heard that you were dying in the northwest, so he rushed back to the capital. Do you know why? He said, he came to send you off. If royal brother wants Mo Xiaoyao to leave the Chu capital as soon as possible, then quickly, go and die. Mo Jingli looked at him coldly and continued, that's right, there's another piece of news that I forgot to tell royal brother. Royal brother, your beloved concubine, the mother of our Dachu state's crown prince, has already gone to find Mo Xiaoyao. Do you know what she said to Mo Xiaoyao? Mo Jingqi's eyes were half closed. It was obvious that he didn't want to listen to him. He knew what Mo Jingli was thinking. He just didn't want him to have an easy time. Mo Jingli didn't care whether he was listening or not. Noble consort Liu said that as long as Mo Xiaoyao can help her deal with she's willing to share the country with Prince Ding. It looks like, even without royal brother, it's still uncertain whether the crown prince you chose can ascend the throne. Hearing this, Mo Jingqi's expression changed and his body twitched. He glared at Mo Jingli with wide eyes. You're spouting nonsense. Nonsense. Mo Jingli laughed coldly. Noble consort Liu had already fallen in love with Mo Xiaoyao before she entered the palace. Who in the capital doesn't know? If royal brother doesn't believe me, you can send someone to see if noble consort Liu is still in the palace and when she left. But royal brother, don't worry. Mo Xiaoyao doesn't like your beloved consort and has already rejected her. At noon today, many people saw noble consort Liu walking out of the tea house in a daze. You're talking nonsense. Nonsense. Mo Jingqi angrily rebuked. Mo Jingli didn't want to pay attention to him anymore. He turned around and walked out. After he left the bedroom, he ran into noble consort Liu before he reached the imperial garden. Looking at noble consort Liu, who was as beautiful as ice, Mo Jingli didn't show any emotion or appreciation in his eyes. He hated proud and arrogant people since he was a child. no matter how beautiful they were. Noble consort Liu didn't have a good impression of Mo Jingli either. She coldly said, "Where are you going, Prince Li?" Mo Jingli put on a fake smile and said indifferently, "I'm going back to my mansion." "Where are you going, noble consort Liu?" Noble consort Liu said, "I'm walking around." Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows and said, "Oh, noble consort Liu isn't going to see His Majesty?" Noble consort Liu originally planned to see Mo Jingqi and see if she could get something on Mo Jingli. But of course, she couldn't say this in front of Mo Jingli. She indifferently said, "His Majesty didn't summon I to take care of him. If I go rashly, won't I disturb His Majesty's rest?" "Is that so? Noble consort Liu is so considerate. Then I'll take my leave first." Mo Jingli looked at her with a faint smile. "You're leaving?" Staring at Mo Jingli's back as he left, noble consort Liu showed a trace of anger on her face. How dare Prince Li be so rude to her? "Noble consort?" The eunuch next to her asked cautiously. Noble consort Liu frowned and said, "Go and check if Prince Li went to see His Majesty just now." The eunuch took the order and quickly left. After a while, he hurried back and said in a low voice, "Noble consort Liu is so wise. Prince Li did just come out of His Majesty's palace. It seems that he went to Zhongde Palace." Thinking of the Empress Dowager who had always been rude to her, noble consort Liu's face became colder. She snorted and said, "That old bitch wants to fight with I? She's dreaming." The eunuch smiled flatteringly and said, "Noble consort Liu is right. Noble consort Liu is the birth mother of His Highness the Crown Prince. When His Highness the Crown Prince ascends the throne, noble consort Liu will be the rightful Empress Dowager. By the way, noble consort Liu, I just found out that His Majesty just released the Empress's house arrest. In addition, he also conferred concubine Ju as virtuous consort and Zheng Jiaoyuan as virtuous consort." "What? When did this happen?" Noble consort Liu changed her expression and asked in a deep voice. The eunuch also knew that this was a serious matter. He hurriedly said, "Just now. When I went there, the person who delivered the decree had just gone to Her Majesty's palace to deliver the decree. How could this happen now? No, it's too late. Why did His Majesty suddenly issue this decree? Is it because of Prince Li?" Noble consort Liu's heart tightened. She hurried to Mo Jingqi's palace. He didn't care about the Empress and the other concubines who were not favored by His Majesty. However, Zheng Jiaoyuan had a son who was 8 years old this year. He was smart and clever and was favored by His Majesty. Because of this, even though Zheng Jiaoyuan was not favored by His Majesty, she was still conferred the title of Jiaoyuan. Now, she was one of the 4 concubines, virtuous consort. If these concubines and the Empress united, it would be very unfavorable to noble consort Liu and the Liu family. She hurried to the door of the palace but was stopped outside. Noble consort Liu said coldly, "What do you mean? I want to see His Majesty." These guards were all Mo Jingli's men. Mo Jingli put them here just to make trouble for noble consort Liu. Of course, they wouldn't give in easily. The guard in front of noble consort Liu said seriously, "Please forgive us, noble consort. His Majesty has an order to wait for Her Majesty to come with concubine De and concubine Xian to thank His Majesty. Except for them, he won't see anyone else. What if I have to go in?" Noble consort Liu threatened in a cold voice. The guard didn't hesitate. He said in a deep voice, "His Majesty has an order. Breaking into the palace without permission will be punished as an offense." Noble consort Liu gritted her teeth. She was about to get angry when a eunuch announced from a distance, "Her Majesty the Empress is here." Noble consort Liu slightly frowned when she saw the Empress, who was wearing a bright yellow phoenix robe, slowly coming down from the phoenix sedan. She hadn't seen the Empress for a long time, except for the time when Mo Jingqi suddenly got sick. The Empress had been grounded for the past few years, so she almost forgot about this woman. But now the Empress showed up again. She was still so radiant and graceful, which made noble consort Liu feel inferior to her. "What are you doing?" The Empress came down from the phoenix sedan. She looked at the people in front of her and frowned. Chapter 587. What are you doing? Empress Hua looked coldly at the angry noble consort Liu standing outside the hall. The guard at the door hurriedly reported, Empress, His Majesty has decreed that he won't see anyone except Empress. Noble consort Liu is here, so we have to stop Empress's carriage. The Empress was also surprised. She knew how much Mo Jingqi doted on noble consort Liu. In the past, for noble consort Liu, he often went against the Empress Dowager. They hadn't seen each other for only a few years. Could it be that she had fallen out of favor? But the Empress didn't care about this. She nodded and said to the two consorts who had just been conferred, "You wait outside for a while. I will go in and take a look." The two consorts were originally daughters of decent families. But because they were dull and unromantic, they weren't liked by Mo Jingqi. Now that they were concubines, they wouldn't be arrogant because of the favor. Naturally, they would follow the Empress's orders. "We will follow your Majesty's order," the two consorts said in unison. Empress Hua nodded and ignored noble consort Liu. She walked slowly into the bedchamber. As soon as she entered the bedchamber, she found that there was no one to serve her. The Empress frowned slightly. She knew that now the Empress Dowager didn't care about anything, and neither did she. With Mo Jingqi so seriously ill, even the Emperor didn't have a good life. The Empress knew noble consort Liu's temperament. She wouldn't come to see Mo Jingqi for no reason. But the Empress didn't get angry. After so many years and so many things had happened, how much of the relationship between husband and wife that wasn't deep was left? As long as she thought of her daughter who hadn't reached marriageable age being alone, even if the Empress had been influenced by the education of treating her husband as the god, she couldn't help but feel resentful. Hearing the footsteps, Mo Jingqi turned his head with difficulty. Seeing the graceful woman in a bright yellow phoenix robe, Mo Jingqi's eyes couldn't help but blur for a moment. He knew that the Empress had always been beautiful. Even if noble consort Liu was once known as the most beautiful woman in Chu and Mo Jingqi doted on her, he never thought that noble consort Liu was more beautiful than the Empress. However, in her eyes, the Empress was his wife. He only needed to give her enough respect. More importantly, his wife was a member of the Hua family. Before he ascended the throne, the Hua clan was his ally. After he ascended the throne, the Hua clan became a target that he had to be wary of. Therefore, he rarely paid attention to the Empress' appearance. He only needed to know that she was the Empress. "You're here. Looks like you've been doing well these days," Mo Jingqi said, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. He was lying on the bed, dying. His Empress mother was indifferent, his brothers, his officials, and his beloved concubines were all waiting for him to die. Even his wife was indifferent, as if his death was of no importance to her. Mo Jingqi suddenly felt envious of Mo Xiaoyao. He was so badly injured and disfigured, but Yi Li was still by his side. In order to prevent him from being threatened, Yi Li was forced to fall off a cliff. Mo Xiaoyao's hair turned white overnight for his wife. Mo Jingqi knew that these were things that he would never be able to obtain. "What has the Emperor summoned Chunxie for?" Empress Hua asked calmly. Mo Jingqi looked at her and said with a smile, "Jin is about to die, shouldn't Jin see you?" The Empress frowned and looked strangely at Mo Jingqi. "The Emperor seems to be a bit different. Aren't you afraid of dying?" Mo Jingqi was very afraid of dying. The Empress knew this better than anyone else. Mo Jingqi said with a helpless smile, "Of course I'm afraid. Who wants to die if they can live? But when you really feel like you're about to die, you're not that afraid anymore. Now, when Jin sleeps every day, Jin feels like I won't be able to wake up again. If Jin just falls asleep like this, what can Jin do?" The Empress was silent. Hearing Mo Jingqi say that he was about to die, she didn't feel much of a ripple in her heart. She looked at him calmly and said, "At this time, the Emperor released Chunxie and made Ju Maimai and Zheng Maimai imperial concubines. I'm afraid it's not that simple, right? If the Emperor has something to say, just say it." Mo Jingqi said with a helpless smile, "After so many years, you're still the only one who speaks to Jin so directly. Noble consort Liu is also very straightforward." The Empress said. When noble consort Liu was mentioned, Mo Jingqi's eyes darkened. He looked at the Empress and sighed. Zhen doesn't want to talk about this right now. Empress, once Zhen dies, if Jingli succeeds the throne, perhaps he will treat you well. But if the Crown Prince succeeds the throne, noble consort Liu will become the Empress Dowager. Empress, have you thought about what you and Hua family will do at that time? The grudge between Liu family and Hua family, Empress and noble consort Liu. Yen, you don't have any grudge. It's just noble consort Liu who doesn't like you. At that time, what will you do? What do you want to say, Emperor? Empress Hua asked in a deep voice. Mo Jingqi was a little tired after hearing so many words in one breath. He took a breath and continued. Sixth Prince, Zhang Zhaoyuan's son, is 9 years old this year. Zhang Zhaoyuan comes from a humble family. I will put Sixth Prince under your name. After I die, you take my imperial edict, and appoint Sixth Prince as the new emperor. At that time, with the support of Hua family, Great Elder Princess Fuxi and Aunt Zhaoyang, even if Jing Li and Liu family are unwilling, they won't dare to act rashly. Lung family and Mu family are loyal to me. As long as you take my imperial edict, they will support you. As for the future, it's up to you. After saying this, Mo Jingqi closed his eyes to rest. The Empress frowned slightly and said lightly, "Forgive me for not being able to obey your Majesty's words." Hearing this, Mo Jingqi opened his eyes abruptly and stared at the calm Empress in front of him. He gritted his teeth and asked, "Why?" Empress Hua lowered her eyes and said lightly, "Your Majesty only talked about the imperial court but forgot to talk about the matters outside the imperial court. Although I'm a woman in the palace, I still know some things. The northern region has invaded and the western hill and northern tribes are eyeing covetously. Once Sixth Prince ascends the throne, King Li and Liu family will not be convinced. At that time, Hua family will also be involved in the imperial court struggle. At that time, how will it end? Since I'm the Empress, I should support the young Emperor. But if your Majesty wants to drag Hua family down, please forgive me for disobeying your imperial edict. Hua family is also a subject of Da Chu state," Mo Jingqi said sternly. The Empress said, "Your Majesty is right. Hua family's ancestors fought on the battlefield for Da Chu state. Many of them fought on the battlefield. Hua family didn't dare to have any resentment. But what happened to Hua family? Actually, in the current situation, whether the Crown Prince or Sixth Prince ascends the throne, what difference does the final result make? When the young emperor ascends the throne, the power will fall. With the imperial court scheming against each other, who will care about Da Chu state? At that time, the matter of the Prince Ding mansion, your Majesty was wrong. Then what do you think should be done?" Mo Jingqi stared at her and said coldly. The Empress didn't care and said calmly, "Since it's already like this, and your Majesty isn't willing to give the Crown Prince position, then give it to King Li. Sixth Prince is innocent. Your Majesty, please let him go." Although she had been grounded for a long time, she had still heard about it. Although the Sixth Prince was clever and quick-witted, he was favored by the Emperor. But Mo Jingqi's so-called doting wasn't something normal people could bear. With noble consort Liu and the Liu family fanning the flames, Sixth Prince only knew how to play around. He didn't learn anything that he should learn. Letting such a prince ascend the throne would only harm him. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.